Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider presented by FanDuel inside TCO Performance Center. Matthew Coller, Dane Mizutani of the Pioneer Press. We have just wrapped up talking with Justin Jefferson, Kevin O'Connell, and Rob Brzezinski about the start of the Vikings offseason program here, as well as the National Football League Amateur Draft. So I would like to begin, Dane, with Justin Jefferson. It's the first time we have heard from him this offseason, and I think that it's a little bit too bad that Jefferson is now in the age where he's done enough interviews, enough press conferences, hundreds and hundreds of them, that he can dance around what he thinks without ever really, telling us. And he's good at that. When he was younger, there was like a raw Justin Jefferson who would just sort of say what was on his mind. And now he's a veteran and he knows how to deal with a quarterback situation such as this one. But I did find it interesting that he talked about working out with JJ McCarthy quite a bit here in Minnesota. And then at the same time, talked about how exciting it is to have Kyler Murray, his unique skill set, and kind of tossed it out there of like, well, I guess the best man will win the quarterback competition. And he left it at that. But I think it's worth exploring a little bit of where JJ McCarthy fits into all this. Then we'll get into what Rob Brzezinski had to say about the draft and all that, about where he fits into OTAs, into minicamp, and the lead up to training camp. And I think that from Kevin O'Connell's perspective, he doesn't have to show his hand really at all in those phases. But I think it also says, too, it's not like this organization has said, JJ, whom? We've never heard of him. We got this new quarterback, Kyler Murray. I think that JJ McCarthy will be given every opportunity to develop and show where he's at. I think we know it's not a real quarterback competition until it actually becomes one at some point in training camp. But I also think that if you declared JJ McCarthy career over, the guy should just go to the UFL right now, I think that would have been too far and unfair to JJ McCarthy and the chance that he has to develop and grow.
Yeah, and I think it's funny with Justin Jefferson, like he's gone through this quarterback carousel throughout his career, so he's gotten very good at kind of towing the line. His usual response is like, I don't care who throws me the ball, I'm going to catch it. And he did kind of revert back to that at some point, said it's more of a quarterback thing, like I'm just going to catch the ball, whoever throws it to me. But to your point about JJ McCarthy, like the way that Justin Jefferson talked about JJ McCarthy seemed to coincide with your point in that, no, they haven't given up on the kid completely. Justin Jefferson made it very clear he's enjoyed working with JJ McCarthy this offseason. They've thrown together. Kevin Seifert asked, where have you thrown? And he said, at a location. Like it was trade secrets where they were throwing. Said some of that happened in Minnesota. Some of it happened at an undisclosed location anywhere on the planet. Not sure what was going on there. But the point that they've worked together, it did kind of hit me because it's a good thing. And it's something that they both declared they were going to do, and that was before we knew that they were going to bring in Kyler Murray. So they've kind of held up that part of the conversation that they had, and kind of worked forward into trying to make sure that they're on the same page. And I think even Justin Jefferson knows probably deep down that Kyler Murray is going to be his quarterback week one, barring something crazy happening in training camp. But the fact that he wants to get better with JJ McCarthy, be on the same page with him, I think just kind of speaks to, one, the professionalism of Justin Jefferson, but two, the vision of the franchise. Like, I don't think they fully quit the kid. And I don't think just because Kyler Murray's here that they just don't care about JJ McCarthy's development. It's clear that they do. But I think in the same breath, Justin Jefferson mentioned kind of the same thing Kevin O'Connell's talked about all along, in that this is going to have to light a fire under JJ McCarthy. And Jefferson said if it doesn't, he's going to basically just be sitting on the bench again this year. He said it in a little bit more kinder words, but the thing about Justin Jefferson is he's going to be blunt. He's going to call it like he sees it. He said he's excited for Kyler Murray, but he's also excited to see where JJ McCarthy goes with this competition. So, like, not a lot of new information as far as who's going to be QB1, but we were never going to get that from Justin Jefferson, and I don't think we're going to really have that definitive answer other than just using common sense of that Kyler Murray was brought in to start, not to back up. We won't have a clear definitive answer until training camp and first team reps roll around. But the way that they've talked about JJ McCarthy all along, they're still very much invested in his development. Where that kind of takes him in his career with the Vikings remains to be seen. But yeah, they haven't kicked him to the curb and said Kyler's our guy no matter what.
It's good for him to feel that type of pressure and to really lock in a little bit and say it's either now or I'm going to take that backseat again. So it's all a competitive mindset when it comes to these type of things. So it's all about who's ready for that moment and who's ready to step up and take that initiative.
Remember you talking about wanting to work with JJ this offseason. Just did you get a chance to do that at all?
Yeah, have been doing that, and it's been going very well. So just trying to continue meeting up with him, creating that time and creating that connection, building on those type of things, talking to him about the different things that he should work on, different things I should work on, and just keeping that connection and that relationship is the big thing. So we'll continue to do that, continue to work with Coller and all of the quarterbacks that I can work with, just so we know that connection is top tier when we start training camp.
I think there's a few interesting parts of this, even if it's not Justin coming out and saying, Kyler Murray, QB1, baby. Number one is that both Justin and Kevin O'Connell acknowledged that Justin was in on the conversations and ultimately the decision to bring in Kyler Murray. And if you look at the past history with, say, DeAndre Hopkins, I think that would be pretty inspiring for Justin Jefferson. And he certainly lit up when he talked about the scrambling ability, the playmaking ability, how that could open up things for him. Because, in the past, for most of his quarterbacks outside of Sam Darnold, at times, it was if the play breaks down, then the play is over. Mm-hmm. Whereas with Kyler Murray, if the play breaks down, there's still going to be opportunities for a wide receiver to make a play, find a space. And Kyler Murray is not somebody who just scrambles and runs. He will keep his eyes downfield. You see that all over his tape and continue to try to make plays. So you could tell there was some energy about that. But I think it also just shows you where Justin Jefferson stands in this organization and that he's really embraced that. Like when people talk about, is Justin happy? Is he going to demand a trade? Like all those things. Justin Jefferson is management with the Minnesota Vikings. That's truly what he is. He is treated like a franchise quarterback would be treated here within this organization, and which is why I think it was really important to bring in a quarterback of Kyler Murray's caliber. But also, the minute you forget about the other guy is the minute you might actually have to play him, because there's no guarantee that Kyler Murray just plays 17 games. That they brought in Carson Wentz, and it sounded a little QB2-ish when Kevin O'Connell talked about him at the owners' meetings. But if JJ McCarthy makes big progress, there is a very good chance that he will appear during this season. Even Kyler Murray's best season, where he went 9-5 with Arizona in 2021, Colt McCoy still played 3 games in that season. And with 17 games, there's also scenarios where you're playing backups at the end of the year or whatever it might be. I would project that JJ McCarthy, if he proves worthy to be the backup quarterback, heck, we don't even know what's going to happen with injuries and stuff even before we get to the start of the season, as Teddy Bridgewater once proved. But even assuming that Kyler Murray is given the job and he's the QB1 and everything else, if you're JJ McCarthy, I think there will be opportunities to play with Justin Jefferson to prove that you can still be a quarterback that deserves consideration into the future. And I think in the best case scenario for the Vikings, Kyler Murray plays really well and JJ McCarthy gets opportunities to show where he's at. And at the end of the year, they're having this hard discussion about whether to pay Kyler Murray or believe in what they saw, small sample, JJ McCarthy. So if Jefferson, it would have been out of character for him to tell us, yeah, I'm going to work out with JJ McCarthy, and then just be like, yeah, whatever else. He is a very earnest guy, and so I believed him. But that right there, I think, shows you what kind of teammate he is, that he wasn't just saying, well, we got Kyler now, so sorry. And it is also worth noting, these guys got none of this last year because McCarthy was still coming off the injury, and then Jefferson got hurt in training camp. They had no chemistry whatsoever, which we all kind of figured, I think it'll be fine. And it turned out that it wasn't exactly fine. So I found that to be interesting there. I don't know if there's anything else that would surprise me about what Justin Jefferson said this year, other than kind of putting last year behind him, focusing on getting better, typical stuff from one of the league's best players. I want to move on to another Minnesota Vikings star, and that is Jonathan Grenard, who is not here at Vikings voluntary workouts amidst conversation about whether he could potentially be traded. The latest from Jeremy Fowler of ESPN is that the Vikings don't exactly feel like they need to trade Jonathan Grenard, but things happen. And I got the same vibe from both Kevin O'Connell and Rob Brzezinski, which was the organization feels very strongly about Jonathan Grenard, but they were each kind of tiptoeing around the reports that Grenard wants a new contract that will course correct his salary versus other pass rushers in the NFL. I think that, pushing toward 30 million when the top guys are making 45 is probably fair for someone with Jonathan Grenard's resume. So if you're the Vikings, though, you don't have a ton of this cap space to readjust. Maybe you could help it a little bit in the short term, push it out to the future. But I think we also know that Brzezinski, in his position, not locked into the GM spot, doesn't necessarily want to be signing someone to a massive contract extension right now, not knowing what's to come for the front office leadership. So what did you take away from the comments from KOC and Rob Brzezinski about Jonathan Grenard?
Yeah, well, starting with Rob Brzezinski, the first takeaway I had in regards to the Jonathan Grenard situation is Rob Brzezinski's pretty good at this. He's pretty good at not tipping his hand and just not answering a question if he doesn't want to. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah often put himself in kind of a precarious situation by not being able to just say, I'm not going to answer that. Rob Brzezinski's tenor today was basically this. Yeah, we have conversations with our players all the time, and sometimes they get out publicly, and that's where he left it. Also, while making it very clear that the Vikings are a better team when Jonathan Grenard is on the team. That's probably how a GM should answer a question like that. It didn't give a ton of insight into which way they are leaning. I think if everything was just the same, they would rather have Jonathan Grenard on the team, but there is something called money and there is something called market value that I think the Vikings are going to have to weigh, both with the representation of Jonathan Grenard and just kind of where they're at with their own finances, both now and in the future. So Rob Brzezinski, takeaway, he didn't give you much. And Kevin O'Connell, kind of similar, talked around it very much like you said. I think it's clear for Kevin O'Connell as the head coach and as a coach with a lot of pressure and probably needs to go to the playoffs, probably needs to win a playoff game this year. Jonathan Grenard is going to get him closer to accomplishing both of those things. So it would make no sense to come out and say he's not here for day one and that's a problem. But he did acknowledge that Jonathan Grenard isn't here today. And while I understand they're voluntary, there's a reason he's not here today. Yep. Justin Jefferson is here today. It doesn't make sense for Jonathan Grenard if you are trying to leverage your current market value and the value you bring to the team to show up on day one, even though they're not going super hard. One step wrong and there goes your leverage. So, and the fact that Kevin O'Connell acknowledged he's not here matters. Because it's true. There's coaches across the league that might just say, I'm not going to answer that at all. So the fact that he acknowledged he's not here matters. But then he wouldn't go too deep into, theorizing what that means moving forward. He said something to the effect of, I don't know what that means for the rest of OTAs. It means Jonathan Grenard's probably not showing up until he gets a new contract. But a lot of those questions will get answered, I think, by the draft. Because I think if you're going to trade Jonathan Grenard, you're probably going to trade him for capital in the draft. So decisions one way or the other could be looming here in the next week or so. And if he's still on the roster past next weekend and he's not at OTAs moving forward, then maybe we have a contract situation, a real contract dispute on our hands. But one of the main deadline I'm looking at now is, if you can get a day one pick for him, great. But day two of the draft, if he's on the team past that, then you either are committing to signing him or giving him a raise, or he's committing to playing at his current number or you're trying to meet in the middle somewhere. But a big, big week for Jonathan Grenard in that saga coming up here, imminently.
I think it's fair to interpret that if they're acknowledging he's not here, that is yes, it's correct that he wants a new contract. And this is just putting all the pieces together.
Correct.
And saying also how much they love him, how much better they are with him, would also be a signal to the universe that we're not giving this player away. So those day 3 offers that the Vikings have gotten, from my understanding, are not going to be good enough. They're going to give the finger wag to those and reject them because, you would much rather on a team that is pretty solid right now and has a good chance to compete for the NFC North, have Jonathan Grenard on your football team and just go forward. And maybe you've got to make an adjustment. But even if we look at Dexter Lawrence, his adjustment contract-wise with Cincinnati was nothing over the moon. It was a fairly reasonable increase in his pay, but it was not something insane. I would think from the perspective of Jonathan Grenard, where he's negotiating from, which was not getting a lot of sacks last year, I thought he was great overall, but if you don't get the biggest thing that you get paid for, even if there is the pressures, everything else, sacks are not just as good as a pressure. They're not. That's just a fact. They get to throw the ball under pressure. They lose 10 yards when you sack them. So that, to go along with the injury that he had last year, and he does have an injury history, I could see where opponents would say, hey, man, we're not going to give you a first-round draft pick for somebody who didn't sack the quarterback and had an injury last year and wants more money. Dexter Lawrence is not really comparable to this situation because there are other pass rushers in the world. There are pass rushers in this draft. There are no DTs in this draft at all, in my opinion, outside of like day 3 run stuffers. I don't see any difference makers from the defensive tackle position. So Cincinnati was desperate to get that. And Dexter Lawrence is a top 3 player at his position. I think Grenard is a second tier level star at the position. He's not Myles Garrett. He's not Max Crosby. He's not up on that level, but is a very, very good and valuable player. But if you're the Vikings, you're like, I don't know, man, we signed you to a contract. It's still a pretty good contract. And also Dallas Turner, when playing your role, had his best games of his career. So maybe we don't want to lock in for much more than this. And that's how we end up at an impasse. The question is, will someone on day 2, because I just don't know that anyone's giving up a first round pick for Jonathan Grenard, but will someone day 2 get into the second round and be like, you know what? There's just not players here that we feel like can be difference makers. Let's go a round 2 draft pick for Jonathan Grenard. I could definitely see that happening. And I'm very conflicted on whether I like it or not, because we know Jonathan is very, very good and very, very intense. And he's somebody that if you rotate it in a little bit more, as opposed to playing 800 snaps, maybe it's like 600, could probably be even better, I think. So Grenard is an important part of this. They kept Hockenson. They kept Aaron Jones. It kind of reminds me of the every single summer Danielle Hunter thing where we'd be like, are they going to trade Danielle? And then they wouldn't, because the team is in a position where they can win, and they could win the NFC North. I don't think that's ridiculous. That's a point where you're not trading him unless you get an offer you can't refuse. So they clearly have a valuation on what offer they could get that they would say yes to. That offer has not come in yet. And this to me was a signal of like, well, if you're going to make this happen, then make it happen. But if you're giving the offers that you're giving right now, then it's just not going to be good enough.
Yeah, it is interesting when you kind of zoom out, listen to all the reporting that's been put out there, and slowly piece together a full picture. You can kind of make pretty good inferences into the conversations that are being had. And I think that's spot on. It is, we are not giving away one of our best players.
Right.
But we might be willing to part with him for a value that we see fit. I don't even know if I think a second round pick is enough for Jonathan Grenard. And I understand it comes with the caveat of you have to pay him if you keep him. In some way, shape, or form, I think he's going to get a pay raise if he's on the Vikings next year, whether that's moving money around, whether that's upping a salary a little bit. I think if he's playing for the Minnesota Vikings next year, it will not be at the value of his current contract. But I don't know if a second round pick is enough when you also account for the money you're saving by not giving him money, just because I think you might need a little bit more. Like if you get a first round pick, 100% yes, do it. Second and something else, I think probably is where I would land on it, because like you said, they could win the NFC North. Like I don't know what they are on FanDuel. We probably will get to what
plus 550.
Plus 550 on
That's
FanDuel.
fourth out of 4, by the way, but it's not that different than the other teams.
It's not crazy. Like it's not crazy, and those odds go down. I know, like when you look at players that move the line in a respective week, it's basically quarterback and nobody else. But like over the course of a season, if you are playing with Jonathan Grenard or without him, you have a worse chance without him to win the NFC North. So I don't know if I can give him away for a second round pick, and I don't know that the Vikings can either. Like we'll see where that thing lands. But yes, Friday is kind of the next deadline, if you will, for what's going to happen next with Jonathan Grenard. And I'm curious because it is, I think, by far the most interesting in terms of just roster construction for the Vikings right now, outside of obviously the NFL draft, which is to come.
Coach, we asked you a couple weeks ago about Jonathan Grenard. Yeah. Anything changed since then?
No, I had a conversation with him last week. We're trying to keep our conversations and dialogue going. I have such a good relationship with Jonathan. He's been so impactful on me personally, one of our leaders. He knows exactly how I feel about him, how we feel about him as an organization, and I'll continue to have that dialogue and ongoing dialogue, and as we move forward.
I have my scenario in which they could do it to not even a second round, but even maybe a third round pick would be if with the 18th overall draft pick in the NFL amateur draft, Roger Goodell announces the name Akeem Mesidor from Miami. So right now, his over-under on FanDuel Mesidors is 25.5 for his draft slot. Okay. So right in the same ballpark as where the Minnesota Vikings are drafting. So let's say this is a 25-year-old prospect who had crazy production with Miami last year. So you'd be talking about someone who's mature and ready to step right into the fray. Now, he's not going to be Jonathan Grenard right away, but he could be a day one contributor. So you start Dallas Turner, you draft Akeem Mesidor, you play Andrew Van Ginkel, and then maybe you go out and add one other veteran guy who's still bouncing around or something like that. That's a pretty good pass rush room if Mesidor can play at all. And he's the one, so Keldrick Falk is another one who gets named here. I like Keldrick Falk for a longer-term player, but if they were going to do this, if someone came in with a third-round pick, you can replace him in the draft with a pass rusher who doesn't have to be a starter right away. And this kind of transitions into what Rob Brzezinski talked about a lot, which was path to the field. So if you were going to draft a pass rusher or edge rusher, Keldrick Falk or Akeem Mesidor, I just went with Mesidor because he's more on the mature side than Falk, like more of a complete player coming right out of the draft. Yeah. But let's say it's just either one. If they're looking at their mock drafts and they're laying out the board and they're saying these 4 or 5 guys are all probably going to be there, and the 2 top we have on our board are both edge rushers, our willingness changes to trade Jonathan Grenard, in my opinion, if you're doing that, right? Doesn't it? Like if you feel like you could get Falk and you love him, you could get Mesidor and you love him, then you're much more willing to move Grenard because you get the cap space that goes along with it. And then this year's kind of interesting because if you look at the free agent market, there's still a bunch of names that are kind of bouncing around there. There's a lot of wide receivers, but there are probably 25 NFL players who can be starters after June 1st. So you create the cap space, you get that extra cap space from Jonathan Allen, and then all of a sudden you're like a potential player. And this ties into what we heard at right? I'm doing the Brian Windhorst thing, and then this ties into what Rob Brzezinski told us at the owners' meetings about keeping the powder dry, which means they would have opportunities to add to their team before training camp. And there you have it, the scenario where they could trade Jonathan Grenard and not feel like 2026 got blown up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that theory makes sense. Like that is the Windhorse meme. You put your finger up and you took us on a path to how it would all make sense. But yeah, that's why Friday matters to the Vikings. And I guess in that sense, Thursday matters to the Vikings in the Jonathan Grenard saga, because if you can find a replacement for him or somebody to kind of bump down the pecking order where Dallas Turner would then be the replacement for Jonathan Grenard, and whoever you drafted at 18, maybe a trade back, you get some picks and you still get the guy you want in the 20s, could play the Dallas Turner role, then yes, I guess that makes sense. Now, if they come out on Saturday and take Dylan Thieneman because that's who everybody thinks they're going to take in the mock, then I guess that probably blows up your theory. Like if they walk away with a safety in round 1, well, then they're probably not trading Jonathan Grenard unless they get a massive offer that they simply cannot refuse. But it is interesting. If the board falls the way it falls, and the Vikings and Rob Brzezinski has said this from the beginning, you want to stack the board objectively. You do not want to move players around and up the board and down the board based on need. It sounds very much like best player available. And if the best player available and the player they feel strongly about happens to play edge, and he happens to be sitting there at 18, or there's 3 guys sitting there at 18, and you feel like you can roll the dice and move back to the 20s, and you walk away from round 1 with an edge, then yeah, that probably, if we're just Vegas and we're moving the line, that probably increases the odds that Jonathan Grenard could be traded on day 2. This is all theoretical, but it's interesting, and it's something that will be worth keeping an eye on during round 1 of the draft. Another thing that would be worth keeping an eye on in round 1 of the draft is just how the board falls from a talent perspective, because Rob Brzezinski has made it very clear, and he said it again today, something to the effect of, look, even if they aren't going to contribute all the way in 2026, if we see somebody that could be a pillar, a cornerstone in 2027 and beyond, we're going to take them. And like, I don't know if they're going to take Kenyon Sadiq, but that felt like Kenyon Sadiq to me. Like that felt like if there is so much positional value, and even if they're not going to have a major player role next season, but we think they could develop into a superstar, they're going to do it. That could be Kenyon Sadiq. It could be a lot of different players. But he was the name that when I heard that, I perked up and said, I do not think that they're going to take a tight end in round 1 of the draft. But if they stack them on the board the way they do, objectively, like Rob Brzezinski said, and he falls. And a lot of people have Kenyon Sadiq as a top 10 player in the draft. And if he's staring you there at 18 and you are staying true to your word of we're going to take players that we think can maximize both now and in the future, he might be a guy too to consider. So like if you're just reading the tea leaves, and that's all you can do at this time of the year with what you have heard and what we have heard, like you can slowly start to piece together how round 1 of the draft might fall, even though it is really hard to predict who they're going to take at 18. Like they don't have a top 5 pick, so it's hard to just peg who's going to be there. But if you just listen, like they're giving you hints at how this thing could go.
So the exact quote from Rob was, make sure we're not passing on a unique talent. Mm-hmm. Certainly Kenyon Sadiq falls under that category, but I thought of 2 more guys that might as well. That would be Spencer Fano of Utah, the offensive tackle, and Monroe Freeling, the offensive tackle from Georgia, who put on a crazy show at the NFL Combine, has got just great athleticism, classic NFL tackle size. Both of those guys are mostly mocked higher than the Minnesota Vikings, and they might have grades that are higher. But if you get to that point, you could say, well, we don't see a path necessarily. Now, why I like Fano a lot is because he could play guard. Yeah. And yes, their guards were mostly healthy last year, but nobody's ever 100% healthy across the offensive line. O'Neal has missed time. He's not under contract. Like all these things start to add up. And when Brzezinski has said it several times now, kind of making this point, it sounds like something that in the meetings he's been hammering home of like, I know that we need X, but let's not pass up. And he has mentioned, and this was my question to him about 2027, and he even said we just got out of a meeting where this was a conversation that we were having about. So that means that these guys are in consideration. I also think that wide receiver has to be in consideration too because of that. Because if you get to number 18 and you're looking at the board going, okay, well, maybe Thieneman's gone. So you're going, all right, well, yeah, there's a defensive tackle there who we have let's just 1 out of 10. We've got a 7 on, and we think he could be a good player. But this tackle or this tight end or this wide receiver, these guys are like an 8.5 out of 10 level of prospect. You should just take the best talent you can get and figure out how to get those guys on the field. I am very strongly in favor of doing this because when you try to look a year out, and he said, like, it's a challenge, right? It's a challenge to write down your roster on paper. And then Teddy Bridgewater's knee explodes. And then, like, what do? There's always things that change very quickly in the NFL. You cannot predict what something is going to look like a year out. I mean, you just can't. I don't think any of us had Kyler Murray as the quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings for $1 million last year at this time, which tells you how difficult it is to look a year ahead. Just stack talent and then figure out what to do with that. So with that said, Dane, we're only a couple days away. I feel like you should put it on record what you think the Vikings will do at number 18.
Cool. Is it a cop-out if I just say they're going to draft Dylan Thieneman?
No, it's not. It's not a cop-out. It's by far the most mocked thing, and there is wisdom in crowds. So,
like, that's probably where I would land right now because it's a need. Like we talked, Kevin O'Connell talked about his conversations with Harrison Smith today too, we should mention. And the conversations with Harrison Smith, at least according to Kevin O'Connell, do not have anything to do with, are you playing? It's mainly just check-ins. I think it's tongue-in-cheek by O'Connell at this point. Like, yes, he's checking in on Harrison Smith. Yes, there's a built-in friendship. They're basically the same age. But no, he's not going to ask him straight up, are you playing? And
even if he did, he's not going to tell us about it
exactly.
Because he's going to let Harrison tell that to the world. Either it wouldn't it be funny if like 4 years from now Harrison Smith announced his retirement and he just like
T.Y. Hilton did?
Yeah. I was thinking the exact. Or Eric Weddle came to mind where what if the Vikings were 10-3 and then Jay Ward gets hurt or something and Harris is just like, give me my helmet, I'm going back out there. I also don't know that he's the biggest like pomp and circumstance guy. Like I don't know if he wants like a big celebration or whatever else. I don't know. I mean, they'll force him to do one at some point, but I don't know if he wants the finality of that. I'm only guessing, but it's just kind of, it has become almost comedy of, hey, Kevin, is Harrison coming back? Like, he doesn't know. We don't know. I guess we'll see.
But the thing about that was then he was asked, does that play a role in your draft like plan? And Kevin O'Connell said, not really. Like, so
no, it shouldn't.
Like, but that's where Dylan Thieneman makes sense. And I don't know if I really like drafting a safety in the first round. Like, unless it's Kyle Hamilton, unless you believe Dylan Thieneman could be that kind of guy or that kind of impact player. I just look at Xavier Woods, like was a 3rd round pick out of Notre Dame last year. And he was it Xavier Woods? Yeah.
Xavier Watts.
Yes. Who's Xavier Woods?
Woods played here. He was a safety, right?
Xavier Watts was a 3rd round pick last
2021,
year.
I think.
And he was excellent. And I think you can find value at safety later in the draft. But that's probably where I would just land based on what we know. There's some groupthink involved in probably my brain at just landing on him. But Dylan Thieneman makes sense for the needs that you have on this team, whether Harrison Smith plays or not. So I think that's where I will land. That's where I will mock. If I put together a mock draft, and I probably will at some point this week in the Pioneer Press, it'll probably just be him. But the caveat of that is unless somebody spectacular falls to you at 18, and then I don't know who that would be. I think that a lot of dominoes would need to fall before a Spencer Fano, a Kenyon Sadiq, a Jordan Tyson was available maybe at 18. But if those guys are, I reserve the right to switch at the last second as that board falls. But it's just when you look at the needs that they have and you listen to Rob Brzezinski talk about how they have a lot of needs and you kind of put things together, safety makes sense. But if there's a more talented, a more highly rated prospect on the board, I think they go that route.
Right now, in my final mock, over at purpleinsider.football, if you want to check out the Purple Insider draft guide, go check that out. Dozens and dozens of players, why they would fit the Vikings, key stats, stuff like that, and potential late guys that they could target on day 3. So go check it out, purpleinsider.football. But I did my final mock, and I took a position that I think hits both things that you would want. Number one, it is an immediate need, but it's not an immediate desperation. And it also is a premium position, and that is cornerback. Avion Terrell was the guy that I took, and I think there's a good chance of that. I know that he had a pro day 40 that didn't match up with what people expected or whatever, but on tape, he is I think a Brian Flores prototype. He is a smooth mover, high IQ, football junkie type player who also has a nasty little edge to him when it comes to playing the run. I just like that. You could play him in the nickel. You can rotate him in. He's got a path to the field, but it's not necessarily someone who you're saying, play right away, take on all the responsibility. That's what I have right now. I just want to be the person to make it make sense on tackle, because I think it really does. I think it really does. And it's being mostly ignored in the mock universe because it's not something that you can look at a depth chart and just say, oh, whatever. But if you look at a 2027 depth chart, then tackle looks quite a bit different. So I just think Rob's emphasis on 2027, and we know that his money has been where his mouth is because he told us, hey, I'm not going to restructure every single contract to make every last dime to sell out for 2026. That's what he told us at the Combine. And then guess what? He didn't do that. They handled the offseason very methodically and reasonably rather than just saying, hey, who knows, man, hot seat for KOC, let's go all in. They didn't really do that, and they did keep their options open for later. I want to talk a little bit about, unless you have anything else on the draft.
I did have just the way that you described Rob Brzezinski constantly saying, we're going to take the best player available in a way that made it seem like that's something he's been saying in draft meetings. It made me think when you mocked Avion Terrell to the Vikings at 18, couldn't you just see Rob Brzezinski being like, okay, Flo, there might be a cornerback there that you really want. But if Jordan Tyson's there, we're taking it.
Right. Or Spencer Fano.
We're taking it. Couldn't you, I don't know, I'm not in these meetings, but the way he said it and the way you've now kind of framed it, I don't know that he's talking to Brian Flores through us or if he's had these conversations. I don't even know if that's the conversations ever happened, but I can almost imagine hey, I know we never draft defensive players high, but if this value's there, we're taking them.
Right. Kenyon City. And he mentioned clusters of players, which makes you think that they have players in sort of tiers of we're going to have no chance at these types of guys. These are the guys who we might have a shot at that we would definitely look at with 18. These are the most likely. And I think that players like Fano and Sadiq, when you run the mocks, someone gets there, or Jamad McCoy. So I had Terrell because in the draft sim I ran, McCoy was already taken. Someone gets there, though. That's the thing. Every single time there's one of these call them cluster 2 players. If you have your top 10s and then your 10 to 15, 16, 17, someone sneaks through the cracks because there's no way to do a simulation where they don't.
Rob, when it comes to 2027 now to the future, you've kind of mentioned that a few times when we've chatted with you. How difficult is it when you're going into a draft to try to project a year forward, even though you know that whoever you bring in will need development time and things like that? How do you weigh the future projections?
We were just in a meeting before we came down here, and that's part of it. You're always trying to balance that. And such a big thing in our league is having a path for your draft picks to play, especially your early picks. You want them on the field. And that's ideal. But there's also a world where you have to identify what the role is year one, but also what the bigger picture is, down the line. And so it's always a balance. And that's what we're talking about, what our needs are, in 2026, and then what our needs are in 2027 are two very different things. And so it's a process of, balancing those two things.
Yeah.
So anyway, that adds intrigue to a draft that's already settled, according to a lot of people. But we'll see. All of my snark about Dylan Thieneman might be completely wrong, and they might just pick him on draft night, and he's a nice prospect.
The only other thing I'll mention before we close the loop on the draft and move forward is that Rob Brzezinski was asked, does bumping the time down from 10 to 8, 10 minutes per pick to 8 minutes per pick change anything? Does that speed you up? Does that? And he said, no.
No, not at
He
all.
said, not at all. That's for TV. We can make the picks extremely fast if we wanted to. And I thought that was interesting because I think there is this like theory that going down from 10 minutes to 8 minutes is going to make people scramble and forget to pick, which has never happened here, right?
No. Well, Dave Campbell, who asked the question, did sort of say something about that in the end, and I'm not sure Rob caught it, but it is. Hey, people forget it was Kevin Williams. It worked out just fine. So the last thing was Kevin O'Connell talked extensively about Jordan Addison and talked around the off-field incident, which was, not exactly the crime of the decade, but not the look that you want for someone like Jordan Addison, who has had these issues previously and more serious things that have happened that have gotten him suspended. But I just asked him because we hadn't heard from him about the fifth-year option, so forth. And once again, I would say for probably the 37th straight time with Kevin O'Connell, he has not wavered at all on Jordan Addison. No. I mean, this man has Jordan Addison catching a touchdown tattooed on his torso. Like, he really, really believes in Jordan Addison and basically called him the best wide receiver 2 in the NFL and said he's only that because Justin Jefferson is here. I think in terms of offense and fit and talent and skill set and drive, love of the game, knowledge of the game, all that stuff, Jordan Addison checks so many boxes for this team that they are willing to hold their breath. And Kevin O'Connell is willing to risk his cell phone going off at 3 o'clock in the morning every night in order for them to really invest in Jordan Addison at some point. The fifth-year option may be just the start, but I think the message seems to be to Addison, like, dude, if you just clean it up, there's a lot of dollars down the road for you because the head coach who designs this entire offensive wagon is a huge, huge fan of yours. Because I also thought it was interesting. I mean, when Kwesi talked about it, now it was right after it happened, but Kwesi kind of gave much more of a, most of the time he's great. But with Kevin O'Connell, we haven't gotten any of that. There has never been that type of hint. And he has even gone as far as saying, well, he was a really young player when he came into the league, like not 3 months ago, but there's always been those defenses of Jordan Addison. And that, to me, if they were to pick Jordan Tyson or David Boston, or not David Boston, that's
Denzel,
Denzel Boston, David Boston from 2000 or whatever.
Been a good pick back in the day.
Good player. Yeah, good player. Big, giant, athletic guy. But Denzel Boston, if they were, it feels to me like where we have slotted them with a wide receiver is correct, which is day 2, late day 2, 82, 97, somewhere in there. They're going to pick someone to compete with Ty Felton, let the best man win. Jordan Addison is this organization's guy. That is what I took away from his comments today.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the word young, because that is how Kevin O'Connell has kind of talked around some of these infractions from Jordan Addison. Has always been, he's young, we're going to wrap our arms around him, almost non-wavering in their commitment to him as a player and how he fits into this offense. He has to get it together. Like this can't keep happening, but I do think that the leash is long for Jordan Addison because Kevin O'Connell understands how good he is. And I get it. He dropped a lot of balls last year. He wasn't like at the top of his game, but Jordan Addison, when we've seen him at the top of his game over the course of his career, is a very, very special wide receiver. And it's understandable then when you put all the pieces together, like we've been doing on this podcast, and you understand that Kevin O'Connell understands that he has to win a playoff game this year. Like, to do that, he's going to need Jordan Addison to be the best number 2 receiver in football, to be a receiver that could be a number 1 on half the teams in the league. So the commitment to him is clear. We got that at the owners' meetings, and that they're going to pick up the 5th-year option. I don't know that there was ever a chance that they weren't, but now that they're moving forward with that, it's clear how much that they see value in him and where they see the importance of him fitting into this offense with how Justin Jefferson is defended week in, week out, leaving Jordan Addison singled up week in, week out, which he more often than not is going to be able to take advantage of. I think you've got me wide receiver pilled though, because like it does make sense to just take Jordan Tyson if he's there, maximize the window with Jordan Addison.
Yep.
Let that contract play itself out, build up Jordan Tyson or Denzel Boston or Omar Cooper, like anybody. And then when it's time to kiss Addison goodbye, don't pay him $30 million and then just have a built-in and then just keep working that. Like if you have a superstar receiver like Justin Jefferson, that's almost always how I think you should operate at the wide receiver position. Maximize the guy next to him, build him up, get a comp pick,
Let him go.
let
right.
him go,
Yeah.
have somebody waiting in the wings, someone a little more talented than like a Ty Felton, and just keep doing that cycle. But I think you're probably more spot on in terms of thinking about their thought process. Listening to Kevin O'Connell, doesn't sound like they're drafting a receiver in round 1, unless, like we've said all along, unless somebody is screaming in the face and like you can't say no to them at 18. But yeah, they love Jordan Addison here, and pretty much everybody does. Like you talk to him across the organization.
Well, I think what drafting a third-round wide receiver does, and there's actually been a lot of success in the third round in the NFL over the last 7-8 years, including Cooper Kupp, Terry McLaurin are two notable names. Amon-Ra St. Brown was a 4th-round draft pick. Now, there's busts that are in there, of course, but the third round has been a little bit of a hot zone for, I'll just throw a name out there, someone like Skylar Bell, who's from UConn. If you go through, and I did this last week, and look at the wide receivers who hit big in the third round, they're almost always hyper-productive guys from maybe not the biggest universities and aren't necessarily 6'4" and 220 pounds. If the Vikings draft a third-round wide receiver, and Felton is in the mix too, and they battle it out, and then over the next year it becomes obvious that this, I'm just using Skylar Bell as an example, that this Skylar Bell guy is actually freaking awesome, then maybe you talk about not paying Jordan Addison and just slotting him up into wide receiver 2 and then dealing with wide receiver 3. So many moving parts, but it's a little bit of a hedge, kind of like, okay, it's a half measure, but also there's a decent chance that the guy does turn out to be pretty good. And anybody who's next to Justin Jefferson will be the best version of themselves. If you can't do it on the field with Justin Jefferson there with you, you can't do it anywhere, is the way that I would look at it. So anyway, well, some interesting takeaways here from TCO Performance Center. For the 10th year in a row of me covering this pre-draft press conference, they did not tell us who they were going to draft. Although Rick almost told us one time with Delvin Cook. But, either way, they usually do not reveal that, so we will find it out on Thursday. Also, I wouldn't want to know. It's Christmas, right?
Fun.
You don't want to see your presents being wrapped. You want to open them up on Christmas Day, and that is what the draft is for Vikings fans, and we have a lot of fun with it too. So thank you, Dane Mizutani, for your time, and we will talk to y'all very soon.
Football.
All right, I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation with Dane Mizutani from inside TCO Performance Center. Matthew Coller here, and I just went through a portal from TCO Performance Center back here to the home studio to answer your questions. So jump in the chat. I am good until the Wolves game, and because it's in Denver, it's at late o'clock. So I've got plenty of time. Questions, comments, thoughts, feelings. Minnesota Vikings draft is on the way, but anything else on your mind as well, throw it in the chat, and we'll have a very good conversation here. As always, the show presented by FanDuel, and somebody come up with a FanDuel question of the day. We talked about it earlier about the interesting odds for someone like Akeem Mesidor being 25.5 is where he's placed. Who might be interesting for you? Who is the most interesting player that could land in the ballpark of the Minnesota Vikings? How about that? But if you've got a better FanDuel question of the day, throw it at me. So let's begin with your questions. We'll start with Joshua says, with so many needs, is it actually negligent not to trade down for more day 2 picks? So it really depends on how the board plays out. Like, there are certainly scenarios where I would say it's not negligent. Like, just for example, let's say that Dane there was talking about how he was getting vibes of Kenyon Sadiq, as Rob Brzezinski talked about path to the field, and should we just say the guy's a unique and special player and draft him, even if he's not going to play as much in 2026? So let's say that he was talking about Kenyon Sadiq, okay? well, Kenyon Sadiq is the guy that they love and that they think could be a superstar. He is like, one of the crazy things is I was comparing Kenyon Sadiq and his performance at the combine to Adrian Peterson, and it's not that different. That's how crazy of an athlete Kenyon Sadiq is, and he had pretty good production. He led college football in touchdowns. He was, I think, 8th in yards overall. I mean, this guy had downfield catches. He had yards after catch. He had everything. So let's just say that they are like in love with Kenyon Sadiq, and he's there at number 18. They believe that he's the last player on the board that could potentially be a superstar. Well, then in that case, I don't want them to trade down. Like, if that is their belief, if that is the conclusion that the Rob Brzezinski run NFL draft in 2026 has come to with the coaches and the front office and everybody who is contributing to this decision, they all said, if Sadiq is there, we've got to take him, and they take him. All right, well, I'm not going to fight with that. I mean, especially since that's a player who could have a Pro Bowl type of ceiling. And we see around the NFL that teams are using more 13 personnel with 3 tight ends on the field, more 12 personnel, more combinations with those guys. That Sadiq is a player who lined up in the slot a ton in college, and also with his strength, he seemed to be, at least from what I saw, a willing run blocker. I'm just using him as an example of, if you see this guy as the all-around, he could be a future Pro Bowler to go along with Jefferson and Addison, then hey, just pick him. The other thing is, too, that in order to trade down, see, what's great about like all the draft simulators is all the draft simulators give you an opportunity to do it. There is not, as far as I know, a draft simulator that says, you know what? No one is offering a trade down. There isn't a draft simulator that does that, or at least a good offer, right? All of the simulators give you a good offer to move down. But if the Vikings are sitting there at 18 and their phones are just completely dead, and no one is offering anything more than like a 4th round pick to move up a spot or two, then you just have to stick and pick and do what you can there. I apologize. I've got a little bit of, I walked the dog earlier, and there are new pollens, very fresh. All of you with allergies, you understand what I'm dealing with here. So anyway, the point just being that there may be situations where they can't. Now, if they get to number 18 and there are 4 players on the board who they have similarly graded, and a team that's pretty close to them, let's say, I think the Chargers might have 22. Let's say the Chargers call up and offer a 3rd round pick, then you do it instantly. But I think in this draft, that might be actually hard to do. The one thing is, every single simulation that I run, I end up with at least one player who I think has been mocked or projected by the world in the top 15. So it's something that they're working on, all of their scenarios inside TCO Performance Center, but I'm sure that's come up of, hey, if we get to this point and this guy and that guy are gone, then yeah, you have to try to trade down, even if it's not picking up the best possible draft pick. But you know, it takes 2 to tango when it comes to that. And I'm not sure how many players there are in this draft that other teams are going to be dying to try to trade up to get, to number 18. So we'll have to find out, but I understand where you're coming from for sure, that, they should, in a scenario like this, be trying to trade down if it's not their guy who's there at number 18. Let's see. Doomer KO. Did the Lawrence trade close the window on the Kwesi Super Bowl window? I don't think so exactly. I mean, look, if we go to FanDuel and we look up the Super Bowl odds, the Minnesota Vikings are not a favorite to win this year's Super Bowl. They are not actually even the favorite to win the division at this moment. Now, of course, Seattle wasn't a favorite to win the Super Bowl last year, so you never really know. Is Dexter Lawrence the difference between whether they could have won the Super Bowl this year or not? I mean, maybe. I see where you're coming from, because had they added Dexter Lawrence, then we would have said there is a real possibility that this team could have a top 5 defense. And if they have a top 10 offense with Kyler Murray, that puts you in the discussion in the playoffs of, you go anywhere, you bring your D-line. We've seen it work a number of times. So I see what you're saying, that you would have been able to talk yourself into, hey, with Dexter Lawrence here, and say they don't trade Jonathan Grenard and Dallas Turner and Andrew Van Ginkel, that was my argument for doing it, was that lineup would just look ridiculous. And you've already kind of reached the end of one thing and then on to the next after this year. So you might as well go nuts. That was my argument for doing it, which I guess Cincinnati took that argument. And then I saw a report that Cincinnati finds it very important this year to win with Joe Burrow. Hint, hint, this could be the year if it doesn't work out, Joe Burrow becomes a Viking, right? But seriously, with your question, I don't think that it has to mean that there's no chance the Vikings are really competing in the playoffs because they didn't get one player. There's still an offseason to go here. There's offseason part 1, which is the first free agency run, where everybody scrambles to get all the big free agents. And then there's free agency 2, which is after June 1st, after the draft, when players are still remaining. There are trades that happen after that. And it is possible that the Vikings could add to their defensive line after that. Although it seems DJ Reader is going to New York, which is unfortunate. But there's so far to go here that I don't think that saying, well, they didn't get this one player, so it's absolutely over. I mean, they have hinted multiple times at there might be something on the way after this that they've been thinking about, and consider that there already seems to be a deal that's done between the New England Patriots and the Philadelphia Eagles for A.J. Brown. I mean, it's altogether possible that the Vikings could have something similar for them, where they have an idea of what they're going to do, but they can't do it until after June 1st. So, I mean, the thing about the Super Bowl is it often comes down to what your path is to getting there. And the Vikings, just for example, I think about this all the time. 2017, the Vikings, they beat the New Orleans Saints, and what they needed that year, well, Minneapolis Miracle, what they needed that year was Julio Jones to catch a pass in the back of the end zone and beat the Philadelphia Eagles. Because if the Falcons beat the Eagles, then the Vikings stay home for that entire week and they rest and they recover. And the Eagles, after a hard-nosed game in Philadelphia, have to travel to the Midwest. It wasn't a great Atlanta Falcons team, and maybe something is different there, right? If the Falcons ended up being the team that was playing the Vikings in the NFC Championship at US Bank Stadium rather than in Philadelphia. So when we talk about that, it's if you could get to the playoffs, then does the path open up for you? We're so far away from this, but I think just in terms of, does it end it? Does it close it? Is there no chance? I mean, I can't say that just because they didn't trade for one player. I think that they are going to have to improve still the interior of the D-line to make a case to be a team that can win throughout the playoffs. So they can't go into it with just these young guys. But I also don't think that we could say, oh, it's over. And the NFC too, I think is pretty darn wide open. The NFC, that's what I mean about the path. I mean, if you go into a game and your defense is good and Kyler Murray's playing really well and Jefferson and Addison are healthy and, whatever, I mean, look at the teams you're going to play. If the Rams regress at all, I think they're the best team maybe in the entire NFL, but if they regress at all, if Stafford regresses at all with old age, Seattle, I think, has lost a fair amount of talent this offseason, but those are the only two teams that I would say, oh yeah, well, they're kind of way better than the Vikings roster-wise. The rest, you can match up the Vikings with the current Eagles without A.J. Brown. You can match them up against the Cowboys. You can match them up against the Packers, the Bears, the Lions, and say that's pretty darn even. And then the NFC South is just, so I wouldn't go that far yet. I wouldn't say that the window closed because they didn't get one guy. Pie chart of 2027 starting quarterback week 1. Well, I think it's probably 50-50 with Kyler Murray, and then maybe like 20% JJ McCarthy, and then it's just a bunch of question marks after that. Joe Burrow maybe gets 10% there. I don't know, but after that, and then draft pick quarterback, so I guess that makes it up. 50% Murray, 20% JJ McCarthy, and then 15 to Joe Burrow and 15 to drafted quarterback X. How about that? Josh says, unless Kyler Murray gets injured, he's your starter. They made a deal for him to come here. Yeah, I mean, he's definitely the starter for this year, right here, right now. I think my point after listening to Justin Jefferson is, as always, Justin Jefferson does an incredible job of being a leader. And he has transitioned from a young guy with, I think, a great attitude he came into the league with, but it was kind of the veterans team when he got here, to, hey, it's my team now. Once he signed the contract, it's amazing how some guys, once they sign the contract, are like, yeah, I just work here and get my paycheck. And other guys put the entire franchise on their back. And I feel like that's what Jefferson has done, and that's what he's doing, working out with JJ McCarthy. He is very aware of how many quarterbacks can play in a season. And I think he's aware that, you know, if JJ McCarthy has to play, if Murray were to get hurt, which is historically very possible, then he better be ready to be on the same page with JJ McCarthy, because he's planning on winning and he's planning on getting 1,500 to 2,000 yards this next season in kind of a redemption tour, I think, for next year. I think that that's what Justin Jefferson is inspired by to work toward this year, which includes being ready with JJ McCarthy. So, yeah, I mean, Kyler Murray, he does not, as you said, he does not come here unless he's going to be the starting quarterback. That is quite clear. But I think at the same time that JJ McCarthy has a chance to show everybody that he can make things interesting for the future, that he can be in that pie chart. It is not over for JJ McCarthy for his NFL career. We've seen Mayfield, Darnold, Geno Smith, all sorts of quarterbacks, Ryan Tannehill, who have had a tough start and have fought their way to being starting quarterbacks. And there was enough flashes there to think, man, if he got on the same page with Justin Jefferson, like, how would it have been different if he only had average performance throwing to Justin Jefferson last year, and they didn't get a training camp together, they didn't get an off season together. So I think at the very least, Jefferson is looking at JJ McCarthy as, hey, this guy might end up playing, so I have to do everything I can to help him get ready to play, even if we all know that Kyler Murray came here to start. Edwin, do NFL teams tend to trade more draft capital in a draft not so deep versus a deeper draft? Yeah, that's a really good question, Edwin, because it depends on how the board falls. If, let's say, the teams have these guys in different, I think Rob used the word clusters. So if they have them in these clusters, you would have, these are the top 10 players, and it's unlikely that any of them make it out of the top 12, say. Let's just put it that way. Like, here's the top cluster. That's your Jeremiah Love. It's your Caleb Downs, Sonny Styles. Like, these guys probably aren't getting to us unless there's a gas mask bong involved, right? So you've got that cluster. Then there's cluster 2 of, we're not as sure where those guys are going to go. They could shock us and be a top 10 pick, or any one of those guys could slip down the board depending on how it falls and depending on other team needs. So let's say, when you talk about trading up and trading down, so let's say that you are, I think, what is it, Carolina, that's drafting right behind the Vikings. Let's say you're Carolina and you need an offensive tackle. I don't know if they need an offensive tackle, but let's just say that you badly need an offensive tackle and you're Carolina, and you see, there goes Maui Noah, there goes Fano, and you are like, okay, the last guy that we have a big grade on is Monroe Freeling. That's the last guy that we have like a starting grade on for tackle. Well, then you're going to trade up. So it really is a situational type thing. But I think where it changes the dynamic is the discussion about next year, where there's expected to be so much talent in next year's draft that if you're a team that's trying to trade up, even if you are, say, Carolina, and you're right behind the Vikings and you're trying to jump them to get your favorite tackle or whatever scenario, if the team that you're trying to jump up in the draft to get to that spot says, we want a 2027 second, that might be where you go, all right, nope, not doing it, not giving up 2027 draft capital just because that draft is supposed to be a lot deeper. So I think that that's kind of how it plays out. And there might be a little more desperation to try to trade up, because there might be a cutoff of, all right, after this pick, there really aren't any star potential players. It's all kind of solid average starters. I don't actually know where that goes in this draft, or if that's maybe a little bit of a myth. I'm not sure, because it feels like every year there is, well, there's only 15 guys with a first round grade or whatever. That happens a lot. And then you look back at certain drafts and they turn out to be great, or you look out at certain drafts that were hyped up that don't turn out to be as good. So I don't know. I think that it can impact because of that fall off. Like, hey, here's the cliff. The cliff exists at pick 15. So we've got to trade up. So it might inspire more teams to, or it might be, yeah, but we're not giving up draft capital for the future. So it's kind of a situation to situation thing. And I think it's one of the more interesting storylines this year is how it's impacted, because I think a lot of people are saying, yeah, there could be more trades than ever, but that 2027 issue, others are saying maybe there actually won't be any trades. So as usual, we go into the draft not knowing what's going to happen, which makes it so great. Doomer KO says, I don't know if Rob's comments about a high pick having a limited role in year one apply to wide receiver or Sadiq. Sounds more like a warning to fans they might take a position you're not going to like, tackle or edge. Yeah, I mean, I tend to look at it like it's a generic enough comment to where it could apply to a number of things. Like if you go across the roster, it could apply to wide receiver. I mean, yes, like the guy could get on the field as a wide receiver, but he's not going to be a Justin Jefferson. It's not going to be wide receiver 1. Sadiq could get on the field, but he's not going to play 70 snaps. He's more of going to play 30 snaps because you're going to mix in Josh Oliver as well. It does sound a little bit more like tackle. It does sound a little bit more like edge, where if you kept Jonathan Grenard, then you might be talking about somebody who you draft like Keldrick Falk really not playing all that much, kind of like Dallas Turner only played a handful of snaps per game. But the thing is too, like people get hurt all the time in the NFL. So somebody that you might see as not having that great of a chance to get on the field, they might end up being on the field much quicker. So like I brought that up for tackle, where you might think Spencer Fano or whoever, Caden Proctor, whatever guy they really love, you might think, yeah, Blake Miller. I like Blake Miller a lot from Clemson. This guy's not going to get on the field. And then 2 weeks into the season, your tackle's hurt and the guy's on the field, right? So that happens all the time. But picking that apart, I think what Rob is leaving the door open for, and I would agree with you here, is they might take something that at first glance at the depth chart, you go, okay, like say that you're a draft analyst who lives in Kansas City and you've been mocking Dylan Thieneman all season long to the Vikings because it's just too obvious. And then they take a tight end. You might be like, what? A tight end? But there was a report from Elbert Breer that the Vikings do have interest in Kenyon Sadiq. I mean, how true anything is leading up to the draft, that I do not know. But, Breer is pretty dialed in, and it does make sense to me. But, I think that there's probably 3-4 positions. Corner is even one of them. I mean, there are 2 starting corners that they have. So if you draft Jermod McCoy or Avion Terrell, they might not start day one. And that has to be a discussion behind the scenes as well. So I think it adds a little bit of an interesting, an interesting dynamic to this, that kind of anything could happen. Josh, who's the closest to Robert Smith in this draft? We need a home run hitter. Oh, buddy, I wish there was a Robert Smith in this draft. There really isn't. I mean, the guy that you would say most obviously is Mike Washington, but he's not really a Robert Smith. Robert Smith was really, really smooth. And I mean, actually, you could kind of see a little bit of the straight up running style. Like Robert Smith had these like big, long strides and his knees that kind of came up to his eyes. There's a little bit of that with Mike Washington, that sort of straight up and down style of running. I think in terms of a home run hitter, it's Jadarian Price, for me, would be the best home run hitting running back. Even if he was not RB1, the guy was an explosive run machine and just has that natural, whatever it is. Somebody brought up the other day, Devin Hester. And I think that they tweeted out like when he was drafted and what the analysts were saying about him. And so I was kind of curious, and I went and I looked at what Devin Hester's NFL Combine performance was. And it really wasn't anything special. Of course it was good, but it did not blow your mind. So this applies to me to somebody like Jadarian Price, where I look at him and say, that guy has a natural ability to break off big runs. Same thing went for Dalvin Cook, his combine performance was just not even good at all. He had a vertical jump that I think I can top. And yet the guy was one of the best running backs in the NFL. There's something that is different in how a player is hardwired at that position to break bigger runs. And Jadarian Price has it. So I think he's it, even though he's not going to run a 4.3 or whatever it was that Robert Smith ran. The only other guy who's got crazy speed, there are a few, but the only other guy is Demond Claiborne, but I think he's much more of a 5th round type of draft pick, not somebody you'd be looking at like a Robert Smith, who was a high draft pick. It's not easy to get yourself a Robert Smith. Gazinkad, Dane said comp picks and your head didn't explode. Hey, I like comp picks as much as the next guy. It's really the comp pick thing for me is when the Vikings are going through free agency and everyone asks, do we get a comp pick for that? And the question, it's like, well, they're going to announce it eventually. And we usually don't know the answer until the dust is settled. So that's why it kind of became a meme to me. Like, do we get a comp pick for that? We lost the backup kicker. Do we get a comp pick for that? It's like, but they have a comp pick for once. And I think that whoever the next general manager is will be maybe paying a little more attention to that or putting a little more emphasis on that than they did before. But you either spend in free agency or you build through comp picks. In 2025, they were in a position where I think we all agreed they needed to spend in free agency, and they built a very good team when it was healthy that needed better quarterback play. So, the comp pick thing does make me laugh at times. But I think if Rob Brzezinski, becomes the general manager of the Vikings, there will be more emphasis on something like that because I think he is more focused on building through the draft, but we don't know how that's going to go. Mama says, hope I don't get Dylan Thieneman for Christmas. I just want to make my Dylan Thieneman take very clear. And I know I've talked about it a lot because he's the guy that gets mocked to them incessantly, but I think Dylan Thieneman has all the talent to be a very high quality starting player in the NFL. And I have chatted with a lot of people throughout this about Dylan Thieneman because that's the guy that's connected most to the Vikings. And people see different things with him. One thing that you hear all the time is, hey, this guy's super dynamic. He could play anywhere. And I've had some people say, I don't know if that's really true. Like, I don't know if you can put Dylan Thieneman in the box because in college football, you could kind of go around the offensive lineman, but in the NFL, it's not as easy. So even if you are quick, the offensive lineman will track you down and eliminate you a lot of times if you're in the box. That's kind of what makes Josh Metellus special, is that he could take on pretty much anybody blocking wise at only like 215 pounds. But there's not too many guys who could do that. Most of them, and that's the thing, is that most guys who are 200 pounds in the NFL that play safety play free safety. They play far away from the ball and they make plays, and some of them are awesome. Like, go see Jesse Bates. Jesse Bates has been a comp for me to Dylan Thieneman because if he's not going to play like in the box or a nickel, because that's a playmaker, that's a difference maker. So if they just go with the chalkiest chalk, I think that could be really successful for helping them build their defense. I just look at some of these other positions that we were just talking about and say, how hard is it to get that position in free agency if you need to replace it? And the answer is, well, safety is not that hard. Neither is linebacker, but edge rusher, tackle, receiver, even tight end. Good luck finding those guys in free agency. You normally have to, even look at Josh Oliver. He's a good player, but he got a huge contract for a blocking tight end because even those guys, they don't usually make it to free agency. So it's hard to get good tight ends, good wide receivers, good tackles, good edge rushers, good defensive tackles, good corners. And Jason Fitzgerald, who runs overthecap.com, he did an article about this. Like, you can go check it out on overthecap.com about free agency tells a story. Like those guys become available. So that's really the issue. It's not that I don't think he could be a good player. It's that I think that that position can be replaceable at times if he doesn't become the dynamo that he was in college and he's more of just a free safety. DLM, BPA is the way to go. Sadiq would be fun. I look at Kenyon Sadiq. It's kind of a little bit of a test when you look at Sadiq. Like, what do you see there? I look at somebody who can get the football in their hands and make a ton of plays. I'm not going to say he's George Kittle because George Kittle is unreal and has probably been the best tight end over the last 10 years. A lot of people, I think, would take Kittle because he's so much of a blocker over Travis Kelce over the last decade. So I'm not going to say he's like George Kittle. He's not as big. Kittle, I think, is tougher when it comes to being a blocker and technically great. But when you look at the athleticism, you look at the strength, and he tracks the ball pretty well when he's thrown downfield. Like he's made some jumping catches that are 15 yards down the field. He sheds tackles. He is a willing blocker. Like I see all those things of, well, the Vikings have this quarterback now in Kyler Murray. And I know you can't draft for this, but it would be a decent fit, who has always been very good at working his tight ends. And if you have two guys who one of them is really great at finding spots in the zone, and the other guy is really great at yards after catch, and then you have two deep wide receivers, and you have a blocking tight end, and then maybe Ty Felton develops and they draft somebody in the third round, like all of a sudden that room kind of looks ridiculous. And that's why I like it with Kenyon Sadiq. But, you know, I think because they have, and I know Rob said something like, we have a lot of needs, that the door becomes open for a lot of different ideas at number 18 that would be good. And Sadiq is one that's pretty high for me if he drops. But if he doesn't, I think they're going to get to that place and go, yeah, there's four guys here who we could see as good draft picks. And that's why I kind of laugh sometimes when it's like, oh, this is a terrible draft. Well, it might be at the top, but I don't really see that in the middle. I think in the middle, it's probably equal quality to what it's been in the past. It's just at the top, there's not 12 players who would have all pro type of grades, but I think there's a lot of guys who have quality starter type of grades. Doomer KO, you don't have to explain yourself when talking offensive weapons like wide receiver or tight end. You have a question mark there, but I mean, I think that it goes, that it does go without saying with this team's history as a franchise, with the more weapons have propped up many a quarterback over the years. I mean, Warren Moon came here in the mid 90s and starts throwing to Jake Reed and Chris Carter and is great. And then Brad Johnson comes in and he plays well. And Randall Cunningham comes in and he plays well. And Jeff George and Randall, and Dante Culpepper. And that was with an offensive minded head coach who had competent to good quarterbacks that became great quarterbacks because of what was around them. Blocking is a big part of that too. So if the Vikings draft an offensive lineman, I'm not going to be against it. But yeah, I think you don't really have to explain yourself if you're talking about, getting those types of players. Let's see. Gazinket, are the odds on the number of first round trades this year? I don't know if there is a number. Someone will have to tell me if FanDuel or somebody else has a number. I would always take the under. I feel like there's way more trade talks and rumors than there are actual trades. And I don't know how much shuffling is going to happen. But already, though, we've seen a couple player trades and things like that. Doomer KO, the FanDuel question could be, can the Vikings win the Super Bowl this year? I think that would be like a good question for maybe July. Like, let's see the roster first. Let's have a good idea of what they're going to be going into training camp. The answer is, of course they can. What are the actual odds of that happening are not high for any team, especially a team that is going to go into this probably 15th to 20th somewhere in the odds. And that's where I've always said, though, when it comes to the Vikings Super Bowl, I'm not trying to sell you on this happening because, of course, the odds are very low, but it's going to happen when you never expect it with someone quarterbacking who you never saw coming. So that was close with Sam Darnold. It was close with Case Keenum, and we'll see what happens. Rach, tight end is as much of an issue regarding positional value as safety and running back are. See, I'm not sure I totally agree with that because the free agent tight ends are a little bit hard to find, right? So if they're getting rid of TJ Hockenson after this year, then you probably have to draft one. They had to trade a second round pick and give a lot of money to TJ Hockenson. The top tight ends in the league, mostly, there's probably 5 to 7 of them never become available. Even someone like Kyle Pitts, who's been kind of a controversial player, or David Njoku when he was with the Cleveland Browns in his early years, like there was a lot of debate over how good he was, and they even signed him to a big contract. Cade Otton stayed with his team. So the good ones don't come available a lot. Now you could get an average one. You could get a Ty Conklin or something in free agency. Maybe I'm forgetting about, recent tight ends that moved in free agency, but I feel like the freaky guys, the ones who move around, the ones who make a lot of plays, those are hard to get. But the price tag, you're right. So there's two ways of looking, and I've heard this go both ways with conversations with people, in the NFL, is you could almost look at tight end in some ways as a deal. Like if you look at what Travis Kelce has been paid and then look at what top wide receivers have been paid, it's laughable. It's like, what? That guy who was the premier tight end in the NFL for how many years with Patrick Mahomes didn't get anywhere close to what the top wide receivers got. And the same goes for the top tight ends right now, where you're paying Romeo Doubs $17 million. If you're the Patriots, that would be like the top tight end. So you might get some of the production with additional blocking and versatility at a cheaper price than for a wide receiver. And when wide receiver is really hard to get or find, is there a move tight end, F tight end who can do that? So I think that's a position that's a little separate from the conversation of the premier positions or premium positions, because it's kind of its own animal. Like, yeah, I don't think it falls under the running back category. It is cheaper, but there might only be like 5 to 7 difference making tight ends out there. If you can have one of them, it is kind of a cheat code. But it's a really interesting conversation. Doomer KO, without Lawrence, Dexter Lawrence, we would need to have a top 3 offense to be a Super Bowl contender. Need a massive hit tight end or wide receiver in round 1, or several more hits in the draft, or the right matchup when you get to the playoffs. I mean, we're just a really far way away from being able to say that. I mean, I think that if you're on the cynical side, as you are, I mean, your name is Doomer, so, but if you're on the cynical side right now because they didn't get Dexter Lawrence, I think that that's fair because the odds are not in your favor. And once again, they're trying to swing with somebody else's quarterback and hope that a defense that right now would project maybe like 7 to 10 with great defensive coordinating still, it's about 7 to 10. That's not going to be enough to run you through the playoffs probably. You can always get hot, but I mean, a lot of times the teams that are winning in the playoffs are top 3, top 5 type defenses. Do you have that without Dexter Lawrence? I think the answer is probably not, but we also don't know what else is going to happen with this roster the rest of the way. And it seems like they've hinted multiple times that they're not completely done with this roster. But I think that when I did the look at how good you have to be in order to make your case, I always kept coming back to, many of you have heard this, the plus 100 point differential. There have been teams that rank a little lower on offense, a little lower on defense, but they got the right matchups, the right players got hot, and they ended up going to the Super Bowl. We've seen that a number of times. And I think when you look at the Vikings, what they have right now, what they did last year, can you get to the 10th best offense and have a top 10 defense, and then you go in with a chance? That's what you're looking for right now. I do agree with you that it would have been a different feeling if they traded the farm for Dexter Lawrence. It would be like, holy bleep, it's all in. This is crazy. And I would have been as on board with the throw caution to the wind and here we go type of vibe as anybody else. But I think without doing that, there is still some flexibility to see where this is going to go from a roster perspective into the rest of the summer. Rach says Sadiq would be a historical outlier in terms of production at the tight end spot. Son of Beaver says would be okay with Sadiq. Rach says the last skill position player to be drafted with less than 1,000 yards is Benjamin Watson in 2004. Well, that's interesting research there. But the thing is, like, in college football in general, were there any 1,000-yard tight ends last year? I don't even know if there were any 1,000-yard tight ends. It would be a projection with Sadiq. I agree with that. But I think he was 8th in yards in all of college football last year among tight ends. I think Eli Stowers was number 1, and I don't even believe he got to 1,000 yards. So it's a little bit of a different situation, and he is on the younger side, a little less experienced. But I think that what you're bringing up, the concerns are fair. When we talk about like both sides of any draft pick, how it could work out and how it might not. Sometimes the guy who is the athletic freak that didn't produce as much is a red flag. I just look at his production as being good. I didn't look at it and say, oh man, the guy had 12 catches. This is going to be a big problem. They're just drafting him off the combine. If you watch, even just call up a highlight reel. I know everybody wants you to watch every single play, but just call up a highlight reel, watch him break tackles, watch him make contested catches. They spread the ball out a lot in that offense, and he was a main part of it. But, I think that it did help him that they have that spread offense, and it usually bumps up, guys' stats and stuff. But I look at him as somebody you can use in a lot of different ways in an offense, and it's just very hard to find somebody that has that type of physical talent, who can run through people, who can bully people to catch the football. So he's pretty unique to me. But I think that the drawbacks are there. It's not a guy who has 5 years or 4 years of production. I think every one of the guys that you're going to take is going to have something like that. Like Keldrick Falk, his production fell off this last year. It was good in 2024, but it wasn't as good this year. Peter Wood's production wasn't as good. Avion Terrell, Jermod McCoy's coming off an ACL. Like that is part of this draft. Like, I think that there's a lot of guys who are good prospects, but when you draft 18th, even when they took Christian Darrisaw was coming off an injury. People questioned whether he was tough enough. Jordan Addison weighed like 160 pounds, and everybody thought, is he, whatever it was, 180, I don't remember what it was, but he was really light. Maybe it was like 170. Is he going to be able to deal with the, bully corners? Justin Jefferson, can he play anywhere outside of the slot? Like every single one of these guys is going to come along with a question. So you have to weigh, does he need more experience? I think the answer is yes, but the tools are there. And it's not like, he had more touchdowns than anybody else in college football for a tight end. It's not like they didn't use him at all, and he was just sitting on the bench being jacked. So, but it's an interesting discussion. I'm definitely not meaning to downplay what you're saying, because I think that's both are reasonable concerns. JP, just hope a guy like Tyson falls, but also hope teams underestimate Pons and can take him at 49. I think Pons is a better prospect than Terrell, and if there's a defense that can maximize him, it's ours. Man, I'm just a huge enjoyer of D'Angelo Pons. Because when you're watching college football in the season, it's a little bit of a different experience than trying to do draft stuff. Because when you're doing draft stuff, there's so many things that are in your head, like what was his 40? Does he really have the quickness? And then you can't eliminate some of that stuff. You also can't eliminate all the things that all the draft analysts say and all the reports and all the inside. Like, it's all clouding your judgment when you're trying to go back and watch players. But when you're just watching in the season, there are a few guys over the years where you just go, dude, that's an NFL player. I don't know what to tell you. That's an NFL player. And D'Angelo Pons is that guy for me. That watching him, that he was one of my favorite players to watch all year. Their offense was really good in Indiana, but that dude could lock up anybody. He was competitive, explosive. He made plays on the football. He was physical. He could tackle. And I'm just like, I didn't actually even know his height. They would talk about being undersized, but I didn't know his height. You watched him against big wide receivers. He could take guys on. So I think if he's 5'11", he's getting drafted in the first round based on his production. I don't know if he's a better prospect than Terrell or not. Terrell is maybe not as fast as Pons, but I like him for gosh, I mean, if I was drafting at the end of the first round, I would be considering a guy who had production like that against the best competition in the biggest games. Like, what more do you want this guy to do? So if he drops the 49, usually though, flawed corners, Byron Murphy Jr. is proof of this. Flawed, but good corners tend to go early in the second round. So that's kind of where I have him, but who knows? Purple Pain, excuse me. A lot of Diet Dr. Pepper this week, folks. A lot of Diet Dr. Pepper. And I'm going to need to, I need to ease it back. I think we might end up needing like a quieter podcast because I'm going to be doing live both days. So maybe I need to read questions like this to preserve the vocals because Thursday and Friday are going to be long days for the pipes. Purple Pain says, will the Vikings ever do something that we don't expect, like trade up for Jeremiah Love, or will they always take the safe pick like Dylan Thieneman or Kenyon Sadiq? I think Sadiq would be the one that I haven't seen anybody mock them Sadiq. So we expect stuff because we've talked about every possible way of looking at this draft. So there's almost nothing you can get to where we'd be like, total shock, can't believe it. Or at least I shouldn't say it that way. I should say there are very few scenarios where we could get to and be like, what? That kind of happened when they took Mike Hughes in the first round in 2020. No, what am I thinking of? 2018. 2018. It was like a corner, huh, Zim? Really? We're doing the corner thing again here? So that was a little bit surprising when they took Mike Hughes. And then after Hughes got an interception in his first game, Zimmer took a bunch of shots at us for criticizing the pick. So that one was a little bit of a surprise, but how often have they done the thing we haven't expected in recent years? Very rarely. It's mostly the stuff that we totally expect. So I agree with you there. And part of it is because we spend so much time analyzing and evaluating and figuring out scenarios and everything else. The trade up would be the thing that would be the most unexpected. If somebody drops Caleb Downs, Jeremiah Love, I don't think either one of them will. I think they're high picks, but you can get to a spot if you're doing a mock draft. You can get to a spot where you're like, where does Jeremiah Love go here? Because if he doesn't go fourth and he doesn't go, I mean, I think the Giants are in play for Jeremiah Love. I think that they would consider doing that. Get a weapon to work with Malik Neighbors, Jackson Dart. I know they need other stuff, but I think that folks are overlooking the possibility of Jeremiah Love to the New York Giants at number 5. But if he somehow gets past that and doesn't get taken number 7, then it becomes interesting. Sonny Styles is another one that could potentially drop, and the Vikings could say that is a Brian Flores player if I've ever seen one, and that would probably be the one. Because I think we've talked about a little where it's like, all right, if Downs or Jeremiah Love drops, then yeah, I mean, dig into the bag of draft picks and see what you can do. Or this is a good time to trade Jonathan Grenard. That scenario I think is out there. But Sonny Styles is one that we haven't really brought up. Arvell Reese, I don't think makes it anywhere. But Styles, he, after the combine, was locked in at a certain spot from all the mock drafts. But there's always one. So it doesn't guarantee that he's going to be that guy. If they did that, that would be the one that would be unexpected. That wasn't even anywhere in my draft guide. I wrote up like 50 players, and that's not anywhere. PurpleInsider.football. Go check it out. Josh says, regarding the draft, what offensive position is the bigger needle mover in providing more sustained drives to help the defense? Do we go tight end, wide receiver, running back in round 2? Well, wide receiver to me is always going to be the biggest needle mover. Like we were talking about tight end, and I like the idea of a move tight end, somebody who can catch 75 passes, get yards after catch. You saw Colston Loveland last year, Brock Bowers. Like there's been a little bit of a new wave of these really freaky athletes who can go downfield a little more. Because even last year, I was wrong about Colston Loveland because there was this long run of tight ends that had been taken where you're like, they just gain 10.5 yards a catch and they're all kind of the same because there's positional limitations there. And, your Fryer Muths and Komets and guys like that, where you just go, what difference is the guy really making? And then this new wave came in. Like, oh, okay, well, there's the difference that they're starting to make, including Loveland. So maybe Sadiq is that guy, but I'm always going to think a number 3 wide receiver. And we saw this from when they had KJ Osborne. There's a lot of big plays that he made throughout the years. A handful from Jalen Naylor. You guys know it going back to Jake Reed. If you have that number 3 wide receiver and he's a dude, he's a difference maker, I don't know what other teams are supposed to do, because you can cover a number 2 wide receiver one-on-one. You can bracket a number 1 wide receiver, but are you taking on Jordan Tyson with a nickel, or Denzel Boston, is a big giant guy with a nickel? I mean, that's like the big slot has been a very effective position in the NFL for like an Anquan Bolden or late Larry Fitzgerald. If you have a big slot guy, then, or a route running slot guy, you're talking about nickels and safeties and linebackers trying to cover that person. And that's why some of the best wide receivers in the NFL, like Cooper Kupp, even Jefferson at times, are moved into the slot. Jackson Smith, the Jigba a lot, because it just creates these challenges for teams. But imagine you have to deal with that every play because of a number 3 wide receiver. Running back is helpful, but I don't know that other than Jadarian Price, if there's a running back right away who you'd say, this guy instant impacts our ability to hold on to the football and get first downs. I don't know that's the case. Fetchwater, really interested to see the UDFA class. All right, Fetchwater, you get the neck roll here. You get the neck roll for tonight for wanting to see the UDFA class. That's well done. They've done well the last couple years. There's at least one surprise who sticks. Always, yeah. I mean, they haven't had, Pace was an impact player for a couple years and then was overtaken by Eric Wilson. Dwight McGlothern, Gabe Murphy, we kind of thought those were headed somewhere. Chaz Chambliss is another one. Bo Richter, a lot of times they end up being free agent type guy, or special team type guys, the unrestricted free agents, or role players or backups. But every once in a while, there's somebody who becomes a starter. But if you've reached the point already, like you are mega jacked up for this draft when you can't wait to see the unrestricted free agents. And I remember last year was the first time last year after the draft that I ever went through the list, and the video did great in terms of numbers. I did a video just looking at like the 5 favorite UDFAs, and it blew up, and I was like, okay, we are on a different level of people loving football right now in the draft. And also, this team in recent years has taken unrestricted free agency very seriously. So to your point, I'm not making fun. Like, I love the fact that there are people who can't wait for the UDFAs, but in previous years, at earlier Spielman, I mean, there just wasn't a lot of effort there. And then they started toward the end of Spielman's time. And when Kwesi came in, this is where you can give him credit. They spent a lot of money and effort on those undrafted free agents, and I think that it matters. So I am interested as well. Jeffrey says, Banks is a difference maker, but 2-foot injuries in 9 months is troublesome. I've got Banks as a guy that at 49, you definitely consider, but not at 18. If he drops into the mid-second round because of that injury, you got to think about it because he's so freaky. But lacking production and an injury, and didn't really play much last year because of that injury, that's pretty tough. Jim, thank you so much for the super chat. Really appreciate you, my friend. Jim says, let's talk about 2027. Why not? Why not talk about 2027? If Kyler Murray helps us to an 11-6 record and a wild card berth, do we pay $45 million per year for Murray? Or do we hit the draft and give JJ McCarthy a shot if he's on the roster? I think an 11-win season, I'm going to throw something out there, and maybe the Vikings will learn from history, is maybe make that decision before the playoff game. What you're going to do, lock it in with whatever GM you have. This is the quarterback decision. We're not making it based on a playoff game because that didn't go so well last time. I think that if Kyler Murray plays well enough to win 11 games, then that's somebody that you probably signed to a contract. And when you think about the way things work now with quarterbacks, is there are very clear tiers to how they're getting paid, which this is why every conversation we have, you can never, and why I love football so much, you can never just lock in, here's the facts forever, right? Other than offensive lines and defensive lines will always dominate games, but that's like, the trenches forever. Okay, great. But even the trenches change, like the types of players change, and defensive tackles, a lot of them didn't used to rush the passer, but now you kind of need those guys to be a part of your, stunts and twists and blitzes and stuff. So everything's changing all the time. When Kirk Cousins signed the biggest contract in NFL history for guarantees, that was one of those, oh, wow, you are either not paying a quarterback anything on a rookie contract or you're paying him everything. Because Kirk was 7-9 with an okay season in Washington and got the most money ever. It was like, okay, every single quarterback you have, if you pay him at all, you have to pay him top dollar. And actually, that's one of the reasons the Vikings have Kyler Murray right now, is that Murray was at the tail end of that, and so was Tua and, a couple other quarterbacks where even I think Jalen Hurts, where you would not say that they were in the top 5 to 7 quarterbacks, and yet they were getting these contracts that were absolutely as big as the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Trevor Lawrence is another one. I think after that happened, a lot of people went, we can't keep doing this. We can't keep paying quarterbacks who are 14th best in the league. Like Kyler Murray is probably the 12th to 14th best quarterback. You can't pay him at number 1 in the NFL or number 3 or number whatever. He's got to be paid closer to where he is. And we've seen this over the last few years. Geno Smith's contract. I mean, remember before he signed that deal, he won 10 games with Seattle the previous season and then signed the deal with Vegas. It was a middling deal. And if you look at Baker Mayfield, he had a really good season, took them to the playoffs. It's a middle deal. And so is Daniel Jones. The cap will keep going up, and you can structure these deals to, kind of have longer term, flexibility, if you will, like where they reach a certain point where you can kind of pivot and decide which way you want to go. So paying someone $45 million now, it sounds preposterous, but when the top guys are making 60, and that's going to go up for the top guys, but the middle tier is going to hang around there. Let's say that his first 2 years of his cap hits are like 17 and 25. And then eventually it shoots up. Then it becomes so much more reasonable and rational than it sounds. So I think that they would if he won 11 games, and that has to go along with great play. They won 9 games with some of the worst quarterback play that happened in the NFL last year. So he can't be the 18th best quarterback, win 11 games and sign him to a big contract. But let's say he's the 10th best quarterback. I think that they would, and I think the league and the world has changed enough. And we saw the Jaguars work around Lawrence's contract last year. There's numerous teams that were in the playoffs working around a quarterback contract. I just think it's changed. So it doesn't have to be if you sign someone to a contract who's not number 1, you are DED. Like, I don't think that's the case. And even in a different world where if there was, think about Kirk signed his before the pandemic, which really changed everything because the cap went down, teams kicked money down the road, and then said, wait a minute, we like doing this. So if Kirk had signed his contract now, if the way that things are, they would have structured it very differently, I think, than what happened. He was also trying to set some sort of precedent and be the business Hall of Famer, and things are just different. But I can see why everyone is very, terrified of a bigger contract. But if he's that good, he's not even 30 years old yet. If he gels with Jefferson, then you're going to have a chance to still build around that, especially if you get a GM who hits on a few draft picks, which would be very nice as well. DLM injury luck plays a huge role. Teams that are in the Super Bowl only had a couple missing starters. That's kind of my point about, like, hey, are the Vikings absolutely toast because they didn't get Dexter Lawrence? Like, I don't know, maybe. But if they have the entire roster, like, think about last year. This is maybe one of the real tragedies, sports tragedy, of what happened last year is if JJ McCarthy had been good, or even, I don't know, Carson Wentz becomes Sam Darnold-ish or something, they were getting healthy. They put everyone on IR at the end of the season just because why get guys further hurt at the end of the year when you're out of the playoffs, but they were getting healthy as a team. So if they had gone into the playoffs, the healthiest they had been all year, especially on defense, I think they would have been a very scary playoff team. But, you know, as so often happens, didn't exactly work out the way it was expected. Let's see. Son of Beavers, FanDuel question, what position would you not want the Vikings to draft if the best player is available? Oh, that's a good question. What position would you not want them to draft? For a FanDuel question of the day. What position? I think I've got players that I would be concerned about, and Caleb Banks is one of them, although it seems like nobody thinks he's going in the first round now based on the mocks. I think that Messidor is probably the one, Akeem Messidor, because he's 25 and has 1 year of great production, he would be the one that would be a little scary. Not edge rusher necessarily. I also think that there's some edge rushers being overlooked. Malachi Lawrence had great production. I saw Daniel Jeremiah kind of hinting at, hey, he might go 20 to Dallas. He is kind of a Jonathan Grenard clone, Lawrence is. Maybe a little bit light when it comes to run defense. Zion Young is somebody who I think is being overlooked as a power rusher. I don't know if that's exactly what Brian Flores wants out of that position, but I also think he's so flexible that he might consider doing it. So I don't know, like, what position would it be that if it's the best player you don't take? Oh, I mean, I guess it's guard. Like, it's probably guard. You could really reach on a justification for guard by saying that, you know, Will Fries. I mean, if it's the Penn State guy, then I guess you could say that it would be worth it if you got the number one guard and then you'll just figure it out. So, I mean, in this draft, outside of quarterback, I don't know. But I mean, even if they love Ty Simpson, that would be insane if they took him, but I don't think that'll happen. It is hard to look at this draft and say, you absolutely cannot do this, even if it's the best player on the board. 18, I mean, if it was Jadarian Price at 18, you wouldn't do, but I don't think he's going to be that. Good question. Let's see. Rach says, I could probably accept the Vikings drafting any position except quarterback, and that's because I don't like Ty Simpson. Well, Ty Simpson is just not a first-round draft pick in my mind. I've seen most top analysts saying he's more of a second-round pick that maybe somebody reaches on, but probably not. So I think personally that Simpson should have just stayed in college because I think that he has the tools to be a first-round quarterback. But we've seen this. We've seen it play out with Trubisky. Now throw JJ McCarthy in there, Ryan Tannehill. These guys who don't have a lot of passes in college, it's very hard to learn how to play quarterback on the fly. And I think even if you were JJ McCarthy, if you were advising JJ McCarthy now, if you could go back in time, you'd be like, stay another year. Be the centerpiece of their offense, learn how to play quarterback in the NFL or in college, and then be ready for the NFL. The guys who come out too early, Anthony Richardson needed another year in college. And maybe the fact that they get paid so much will impact some guys. But Simpson, I think he came out too early, and I would be very concerned about spending a top draft pick on him if I'm any of these teams, unless you have a really good plan to develop him, which everybody does on paper and then seems to struggle when it's actually time to do that. Son of Beavers, I don't know if you get a comp pick for Ryan Wright, but he did get paid quite well. I guess it's possible. I haven't seen the comp pick formula for next year. DLM Claiborne is a Darren Sproles type back. The difference there is go back and watch Darren Sproles in college. It's insane. Claiborne didn't have great performance overall. He averaged like 5 yards a carry. Is pretty average. I see the skill set where you're talking about. But Sproles, dude, I was watching a playoff game. I don't even remember what year it was from. It was Patriots and Chargers where Sproles took the game over. Catching passes, explosive runs, kick returns. It was insane. I think the explosiveness that you're talking about is there, but Sproles was kind of one of those one-of-one guys. I don't know how many you're ever going to run into again that have that unique of explosiveness, despite the fact that they're that size. DLM with Thieneman. If you need a center fielder, you can get those in the later rounds. Malachi Moore is an example from last year in the 5th. It tends to be my thought is the the deep safety who hovers back there, if that's what he's going to be, if they think he's going to play everywhere, nickel corner, in the box, that he's going to be Harrison Smith-ish, then that's a different story. If they think that that's going to be the case. But if he's going to be a free safety type, then it's really not that worth it, because Jesse Bates is a good example. Jesse Bates was a great player for Cincinnati in that role, and he makes $16 million a year and was available in free agency for the Falcons. And that's not even that much. Like, that's the Cam Bynum thing. And that's what I really don't know how they feel about it, because I have heard differing opinions about it. I have heard that some people think, yeah, this is a dynamic player who is going to be able to, because he did play this kind of nickel, sometimes linebacker-y type of role in college. Can you really play that in the NFL, though, at his size? Would be a question. Or are you just going to get washed out? Like, he's really good at, and this is why, like, college football to the NFL is just, when I watch it, I'm like, that's not the same sport. When I go trying to watch these guys who come out in the draft, I'm like, I respect and sometimes make fun of the draft analysts when they miss really badly, but I respect that they know how to do this, and the real scouts and everything else, because that game is so much different. You try to figure out, like, I'm watching Denzel Boston, and I'm watching his quarterback, like, what is going on here? This guy, you think that JJ McCarthy didn't have touch on his passes? Watch this guy. He was throwing it all over the place at 110 miles an hour. Casey Concepcion, can we get the guy Kellen Mond in there or something? Throw the man an accurate pass. It's really hard to figure these things out. So with someone like Thieneman, there are plenty of plays where they'll call it like scraping kind of thing, where he'll be in a linebacker-y or slot type position, box safety, and they'll run to the opposite side, and he will fly down and he'll go past blockers. They'll try to catch up to him, can't get him. The wide receiver who's supposed to go out and get him can't reach him because he's too fast, and he'll make a play. And you're like, yeah, that's awesome. Do you actually get there in the NFL though? Like, I don't know. I don't know if you get there in the NFL or if the huge guards and tight ends and stuff just wash you out because you're not big enough. I actually don't know. It's a question, because if he can play there at his size and do it, then it makes more sense. It's more valuable than it would be if he can't. Let's see. Son of Beavers, are there positions you think we draft multiple of? I think cornerback and safety most likely, with O-line not far behind. When it comes to corner, I could say yes. Offensive line, maybe just in general, like a center and a tackle. Yeah, sure. A center and a tackle would make sense. I mean, there's always like hey, you could take a 3rd round receiver and a 5th round wide receiver or 7th round wide receiver. Technically, that would be defensive tackle is the one that makes the most sense to me. Like, say in the 3rd round, you take Grayson Halton, and then in the 6th round, you take some big old dude who's supposed to stuff the run. I'm sure I have some names somewhere. Xavier Harris. Is that like a 5th round guy? If that would make a lot of sense, like 2 different types of defensive tackles. D-line in general would make sense to take multiples. This edge class, there are guys who Dane Brugler has at like edge 14, where I look at his production, I'm like, that guy had like 14 sacks last year. Like, he might be good. I don't know. Not always production correlating to NFL success, but I think there's a really deep edge class. So if you took Keldrick Falk and then in the 5th, you took somebody else, I wouldn't blame him for that. Corey, don't take tight end like 3 years. Don't tight ends take like 3 years to develop. Drafting weapons for another team isn't for me. So I think that that happened a few times and sort of became like the thought, right, of exactly what you're saying. Like, they take a couple years to develop, and this has been Kyle Pitts to some extent. So don't take them because you're drafting them for another team. Yeah, I remember that happened a number of times over a stretch of years, to where that did become like an accepted feeling about 1st round tight ends. But recently we've seen it go a completely different direction. And this is why things are hard to figure in the NFL. Just for example, last year, Colson Loveland comes in right away. He's awesome. I was very skeptical of that pick. if you guys were watching the live draft show last year, which reminder, live for day 1 and day 2, right from this seat, I'll have the draft TV over here, and we'll have, I don't know, I got to create some sort of how we can have the board falling or whatever graphic, but we're doing it again. But I remember last year, and intern Clay was here, and he was a Bears fan. And I was making fun of intern Clay. Like, yeah, man, your team drafted a tight end in the first round when they needed everything defense. So good luck with that. I probably said what you said. Like, in 3 years, maybe he becomes a reasonable player, and he was good right away. So was Brock Bowers. So was Tyler Warren. It's like, I think with the way offenses are working these days and the amount of wide receiver-ish stuff that they're doing, it's a little easier. I also think, remember, Irv Smith came in, and he didn't even turn out to be a great player, but Irv Smith came in and played wide receiver 3 basically for the 2019 Vikings. It was really effective. So I don't know. If you draft Sadiq, you can work him into a role that is really easy for him right away with plans to have him be the starter in year 2 along with Josh Oliver. I kind of like that plan. But it is probably the hardest one to figure. Everyone else, every other position falls into a pretty clear, hey, edge rushers, come on. If you hit on that guy, it's worth $35 million. Wide receiver, if you hit on that guy, it's worth $35 million. If you hit it big. Tight end is a little weird because they don't get paid as much, but there's very few great ones. And the great ones are just a nightmare for opponents. If you have a great tight end, it's not fun. San Francisco, it's been one of their cheat codes. Kyle Shanahan's brilliant, we all know, but it's a cheat code to have that tight end. So I go back and forth because there's risk involved. There's development curve involved. I totally agree. But also when another team has one and your linebackers have to chase around that guy all game long, or your nickel corner is having that guy slam into him all game long, it's not as fun. And teams are using more big personnel than ever to try to get that advantage. Gazinkad, BPA is cool, but what about best player available that is also a position of need, which would be BPATIAAPONWAV. It's not as catchy, but I can see it. And I'll try to remember all of those letters for if they do that. That's where I think this does work for the Minnesota Vikings. I think that position, what you're describing, how would we say this? Bapanawov. How about Bapanawov, best player available that is also at a position of need? Bapanawov. It's probably corner, right? Like, I think corner is what you're talking about. That is a potential BPA if you got Jermod McCoy, who I know there's questions about his knee. Or even Avion Terrell. Like, it might be one of those two guys. So let's say but it's also a position of need. I think it's a clear position of need is corner right away and also for the long term. How many other positions fall into that? Defensive tackle certainly does, where it could be the best player. That one's harder though, because you'd have to really see Caden McDonald or Peter Woods as the best player available. I find that hard to believe that either one of those guys would be the best player available on the entire board. But it could be Jermod McCoy. That could be the case. And if they think Thieneman is so much better than everybody else, then just take him. But yeah, that's kind of what you want. Josh won't be shocked if the Vikings take an offensive tackle early. I've got a weird feeling. I like it. I really do. And it's really, it doesn't quite fit Bapanawov, but it does fit with the future, with 2027. I don't have an acronym for that, but 2027 and not having necessarily a path to the field, as Rob Brzezinski was discussing today, I think it's a great decision. I've always felt strongly that you draft for 2 years out, and the times that we've seen the Vikings draft for right away, last year it worked with Donovan Jackson. He was an effective player, but he's probably going to be better this year than he was last year. Most of the time, that ends up being how it goes. Very rarely is it Justin Jefferson where the guy just arrives and is amazing. And they've had it happen a few times. They've had it happen with Jordan Addison, with Darisaw, but those are the outliers. Most of the time, these guys start producing their most in the following season. And I just think that the tackle outlook is very shaky into the future with O'Neal, with some injuries he's had, but mostly the contract situation. And then Christian Darrisaw. And even then, guard, if you draft certain guys and they could play guard, well, that's great too. And most of these players this year are being talked about of guys who could kick in. So tackle is very interesting to me. Alex, Jermod McCoy might fall due to medical. Saw that. He may need another knee procedure to replace a bone plug in his knee. I think he could wait until next year. Are you out? Well, I don't. And then Corey says, did you enjoy the Andrew Booth Jr. injury experience? I see with medicals, this is where I have a very tough time, because why is there a medical out there on Jermod McCoy? Because maybe somebody wants him to drop to them, right? Or is this just a real thing that the insiders found out? I don't know. We don't know that going into the draft, because it could be the case that somebody wants it out there so they can draft Jermod McCoy. Remember last year, there was the corner who went to Arizona from Michigan, blanking on his name, who completely dropped, that was supposed to be a top 15 pick because no one knew about the medicals. So I find it interesting that suddenly everybody kind of does know about what's going on with Jermod McCoy. I mean, maybe his agent needed to do a better job, or maybe teams are putting this out there because they want him. I honestly don't know. All I know about Jermod McCoy is this is now suddenly one to watch with the medical issue. I think he's an awesome football player. And if you get Jermod McCoy at 18 because there's a couple teams that are a little spooked by this and decide that they want to go a different direction, it's risky probably. You could tell me as a doctor what the situation is there maybe, but I mean, good football player, if there's some injury risk, it makes it hard, because you got to know what kind of risk we're really talking about. Is this the guy could play 3 years and then be done with football? Or is this, hey, it might be a short-term thing and it's okay? We just don't really know. So I tend to probably overly ignore medical issues going into the draft, because this was even the case with Penix, and I know he just tore his ACL again, but it's like, I don't know if he's going to get hurt again. I haven't examined his knees, so it's tough. It is tough. I really like him as a football player though. And I really like the position, but I would also throw out that Avion Terrell is maybe dropped because he had not the best pro day. And he was a prospect that was ranked right in where the Vikings are for a long time going into draft season until that. DLM, does Simpson go early for a quarterback needy team? Could push back more talent to 18? I don't think so. This type of quarterback has mostly been not in the first round. The guy who, put it this way, when I've looked at consensus mocks over the years, if there's a guy that is in the top 5 consensus mock for a quarterback, the Will Levis, it's pretty rare that happens. Like Levis is a pretty big outlier. Even Shadur Sanders, there were wide ranges of opinions on where he should go. Normally, if their general thought in the consensus board is, I think that Arif has him at like 37 or something like that, 38. That means that it's unlikely a team is going to reach that much. That they may drop, but teams don't usually reach that much. You see it every once in a while, the Daniel Jones, where I think it was more of a mid first, but it's not that often that happens. Usually the consensus is pretty close on guys like that. So, second round is where I would expect him. I don't think it's going to help the Vikings get an additional, good talent. Aaron, how comparable is Sadiq to the thought of Irv Smith when he was drafted? It's similar. Yeah, it's similar. Irv Smith was considered to be like a very versatile player, which I don't know on Sadiq. I think that he's got some of that same consideration. The thing is, and I do think that there's some similarities, Sadiq is definitely more freakish though. Like Irv Smith was a really good athlete. This guy is like an all-timer. So it is different. But even then, I would say if Irv Smith doesn't get that injury that set him way back and he was out for the entire year in a stupid fourth preseason game, which still right now, like that game doesn't even exist now. And Mike Zimmer is out there playing his starters. It was preposterous that he was doing that. And Irv Smith gets hurt. I still think that he could have become a very good player for them. We saw a lot of a good performance by Irv Smith. So imagine if Sadiq could become what Irv Smith was en route to. That would be pretty good. That would be worth the 18th overall pick, is what we imagined Irv Smith becoming. And his role in 2019, I think, is a good example of what he could be now. It's not my favorite thing of all time, but I do like the upside of the play. I like bigger personnel. Like the idea of a guy who could get yards after catch. They kind of don't have that. TJ Hawkinson is not really that guy right now in his career. I think that kind of went away after 2023 and the ACL. And they have deeper wide receivers, but you look at what Trey McBride did with Kyler Murray, and I know you can't draft for Kyler Murray, but that's who he'd be playing with right away. I mean, it was a real quick game element, and people sort of, in evaluating Kyler Murray, threw out the quick game element as if it doesn't matter. It's like, wait a minute, it does, that because that makes up a very high percentage of NFL passes, and you need yards after catch. Like, yards after catch is increasing around the NFL at all times. So I think it's going to be a main goal of the Vikings to get the ball out of their quarterback's hands and into somebody who could get yak over the middle of the field. And that's why Sadiq might fit in. But yeah, I think it's kind of like, yeah, DLM says he's a superior receiving threat. I think that, Irv had his moments with that. Like, he ran some, deep in routes at 15 yards and things like that. We saw all the flashes of Irv, but if you put all the flashes of Irv together, they're probably not quite the expectation of Sadiq. I mean, he was a second round draft pick. Nathan, they have immediate needs, some contracts coming up next year, and ways out of other contracts. Just draft a guy that you can't find in free agency. Yeah, I like that. Nathan says productive tight ends are outliers, says my fantasy team. That is true. That if you look at last year, yeah, I mean, there was not a ton of tight ends that were blowing up the world, but there never are. There never are. If you don't draft a tight end in fantasy high, you know this, that it's hard to get a good one. But I tend to agree with your first point, though, that, immediate need to me also means it's not like you'd be trying to draft someone where there's a player in a spot for the next 5 years anywhere on this team. So when Rob is saying, like, hey, let's not just think about 2026, but if someone's contract is up, that is an immediate need if their contract is up after this year. Or at least I would view it that way. Twizzler, Chad Reuters must not care about the Vikings much. His first 3 picks for the Vikings in his new 7-round mock are trash. Oh, no. He has drafting Colton Hood instead of Jermod McCoy in the first, then Traden Stukes instead of AJ Halsey or Jadarian Price, and then Dion Burks instead of Bryce Lance in the third. The only good pick he had was Sam Hecht. I mean, Twizzler, as you're describing that, I gotta say, it doesn't sound like trash to me. It actually doesn't sound that unrealistic. I mean, Traden Stukes is getting a lot of buzz right now because Adam Schefter said that some people think he's better than Caleb Downs. He's like 25, so maybe he is better at driving a rent-a-car. But, I mean, still, like, Traden Stukes is a very interesting player that I like a lot. His production was phenomenal for Arizona. Positional flexibility, safety, nickel corner is there. I like him a lot. AJ Halsey is more of a playmaker, so I think he would be a fit as well, but Stukes is more of a Flores type guy. Jadarian Price, I wonder if he was there, if they would just take him, sure. And in terms of Burks over Bryce Lance, Burks is a freaky athlete, and so is Bryce Lance. I'm not sure which way they would go there. And then he picks Sam Hecht, so they end up with Colton Hood, who my understanding is very high character corner, very physical, aggressive. I don't know, man. Like, I feel like you made it sound like this was the worst mock draft ever. And if they came away with Colton Hood in the first, it would be a reach or a surprise. But then Traden Stukes, a safety, wide receiver, and a center doesn't sound crazy. I mean, it's not exactly how I might draw it up, but it doesn't sound crazy. Alexander, do you have to find a stud tight end in the draft? I think so. Because I'm trying to think about how many tight ends have recently hit free agency, signed huge free agent contracts with other teams. If you've got them, I can't think of too many off the top of my head that played out their first couple years, got big contracts with someone else. Like normally what happens is with the great tight ends, there's only 5 or 6 of them. They stay with their team for 10 years. Or they're like Tony Gonzalez, where they play with Kansas City forever and then go to Atlanta. I mean, maybe I'll have to look at tight ends, but I feel like if you get one, you keep one for a really long time. Even, Kyle Rudolph here is a good example. And he was a 2nd-round draft pick. Doomer, I don't think that anyone mentioned Brian O'Neill today. That might be something we discuss later with the brass. Probably when we get into, well, if they draft a tackle, then certainly his name's going to come up. If they don't, then we'll ask, I'm sure, after the draft, maybe in the offseason program at some point about O'Neill and his contract situation. But, as of right now, I don't know if they would be doing negotiations at this moment. That would be something you do earlier in the offseason, or it's something that you would do a little later in the summer. Probably not right before the draft where everybody's kind of all in there. Alex thinks that O'Neill gets an extension before camp. Yeah, I could see it happening, but if they're going to draft a tackle, then that would be a signal that maybe they don't feel like they can get on the same page. If it's a right tackle, it'd be a very strong signal that they don't feel like they can get on the same page for an extension. So that might tell us something. I think the draft will probably tell us about a lot of different things based on where they go. Josh want the next Rob Gronkowski. He's not in this draft. I think Sadiq is the next Kyle Pitts. I don't see it with Kyle Pitts and Kenyon Sadiq. I don't see the similarity. I mean, Pitts was a tall wide receiver type who was like, hey, he's basically a tight end wide receiver. He was kind of, he's not quite as tall as Jimmy Graham, but kind of Jimmy Graham-ish, where he's going to be basically a big slot kind of deal. He's more Eli Stowers, I think, where it's a crazy NFL combine for a tight end and really productive and so forth. Sadiq, gosh, he is only 240 or something pounds, but he could kind of like throw somebody over the mountains when it comes to his blocking and his strength, and he could break tackles like crazy. I don't know. Like, I don't want to say George Kittle because that just seems too obvious, but there's not that many guys that are like him that have that level of athleticism and strength. There's probably some that have not worked out, but I don't know if I have a good comp for Kenyon Sadiq, because if he feels unique to me, the guy that keeps coming up for a comp is Vernon Davis, if you remember him, because he wasn't the tallest, but he was crazy, freakishly, insanely athletic. If you get the next Vernon Davis, that would be crazy. That would be wild. That's what you're aiming for, though. DLM, I'd be all for getting a tackle. O'Neill is getting older and not signed beyond this year. I'm not going to be down on it. Not going to be down on it if they do it. Alex calling my shot. Somehow the Bengals screw this up in 2026 and the Vikings land Joe Burrow. Yeah, I could see it happening. It seems it's fate. It's fate that it happens, I think. DLM McBride at over 1,200 yards. Pitts over 900. Kittle 600. Well, mostly playing right tackle and then getting hurt. So are those tight ends like this year, you mean? Yeah. Yeah. Well, McBride is kind of a route running tight end, and Kyler Murray worked him the ball a ton. So I don't know. The tight end's one that's a really good discussion, because if you get one of the better ones in the league, then it's totally worth it. If the guy becomes just okay, then it's not, which is similar to the argument for safety. But the problem is there's a bunch of safeties available in free agency, and there's never great tight ends available in free agency. And if you get a good one, it's a nightmare for the opponent. I can't think of anything harder than having a guy who's like Vernon Davis or Rob Gronkowski or, Tony Gonzalez, because defenses, they don't have a bunch of great linebackers to guard those guys. Nickel corners are too small. Safeties, he's going to run through some safeties. So if it works out, there's a very high ceiling there, I think. Rach says, for positions like tight end, running back, and safety, I need a prospect who is very gifted physically and has elite production in order to justify him in round 1. I mean, I guess you're going to have to tell me, like, Sadiq's production versus the other tight ends in college football, the way college football is being played right now, it looks good to me. Like, I don't think it was bad. I don't think that he had really poor production. I guess if you're looking for like 75 catches or something like a Harold Fannin, who was the only guy on Bowling Green. I mean, he played for Oregon, so they're going to have a lot of different players. But I guess we're viewing his production differently because I thought his production was good. I didn't think it was unreal because he played for a good team and they spread the ball out a lot. But he was a central part of their offense. It wasn't like they were ignoring him. I guess I would be, I mean, you said that there haven't been guys who are good tight ends that have his production, but I'm curious about how much tight ends were used in other years versus this year in college football, because he's, on the leaderboard for all the tight ends that were playing this year, or just Oregon in general for their tight end position. Jay Mulls get the best available at 18, wide receiver, cornerback because of the contract worth and positional value, then go tight end, running back, safety that are bigger needs but less money. Yeah, I mean, that's a plan. That's a plan, is going middle or later round tight end. I don't see a lot of guys I really see it as kind of being a 2 tight end, 3 tight end draft. Is it Max Clare from Ohio State is another one that's a receiving tight end, didn't block particularly well, but much more of a possession guy. I think that's what intrigues me about Sadiq is that, and Stowers to some extent, but I don't think he can block anybody. Sadiq can go down the field. That's why the Vernon Davis comp makes sense, because he can actually like run down the field and make plays 20 yards down the field if you need him to. I don't know how many tight ends have the speed to be able to do that. And I think he tracks the ball pretty well, but I overall agree with you. Wide receiver, corner, edge rusher, DT, if there's somebody they love, those are the big money type positions that you should be swinging for in the first round. Purple Pain, to have an offense and defense good enough to make the playoffs, we need solid lines on both sides. That's why drafting Sadiq does not solve our problems. But that's what we're talking about here with Rob Brzezinski saying they're not aiming to just solve problems right away, because even if you draft a tackle, it doesn't solve a problem right away. If you draft a center, it probably doesn't either, because the Blake Brandel is going to win that job. Draft defensive tackle, but if Peter Woods is just mediocre, how much does that help you? The problem is, when Rob says you can't manufacture a guy, I just hear defensive tackle in my brain. Like, I would love to see the Minnesota Vikings get a freakish defensive tackle. Linval Joseph was so much fun to watch. I don't even think there's a Tom Johnson in this draft. I mean, I don't even think that there's like a good situational rusher in the draft. It's a really good run stuffer, Caden McDonald, who I guess would be okay. And then you can't trust Caleb Banks. He may become great. He may become Caleb Farley. And Peter Woods, I don't know what to make of that. There's some people who are really selling hard on Peter Woods, but where is it? Where is the performance that would justify the 18th overall pick? So when you're talking about, hey, it's not going to help us right away, it's like, well, the position that would help you right away is one that's not there. And safety would help you right away. That would be Dylan Thieneman. And that I think would be useful, but I guess we also thought, I don't know. We always think that they're going to be ready, and who knows? Safety is probably the safest help you right away position though. So if you're on that side of things that you want the guy who can help right away and has, I think, a high floor of being a quality free safety, like, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong about that. It's just maybe not the approach I would take. Doomer, the Vikings, Rob especially, have consistently brought up 2027. Should we actually care about 2027? It seems like a competitive rebuild year at best. Well, I think it means like the next 4 years of the player's rookie contract, not just 2027. And if their first path to the field is 2027, I mean, if you were talking about, let's say Thieneman's gone and McNeil Warren is the top safety on the board, that's a huge need for you. But you have him as like the 30th best player in the draft, but you have Kenyon Sadiq as the 15th best player. How can we tell them, no, draft the safety because 2026 matters more? We don't even know if that guy can get on the field. They've drafted plenty of guys who were not ready to be on the field in their first year. So trying to draft for right now is like, I don't know. Shot U99, pretty sure we drafted Mike Hughes because we needed a corner. Yeah, they didn't really at the time, if I remember correctly. They still had, well, where was Terrence Newman at? Terrence Newman was still expected to play, and Mackenzie Alexander was expected to take kind of another step forward. He had been a rotational player, and then Wayans and Xavier Rhodes. So they were kind of looking a year out with Mike Hughes. And then Mackenzie Alexander got hurt and Terrence Newman retired. So then they actually did need a corner, but I don't know if they knew that at the time. That's why it surprised everyone, because I think we all thought they've got a pretty deep cornerback room after 2017, and they have these starters locked in. I mean, in hindsight, at the time it was very surprising, and at the time I was probably critical of it, but it actually made a lot of sense. I think the issue was that we all expected a guard or a tackle at that time first, and then they got them in the second round. Josh, is there a Chris Carter in this draft, or do we need a burner to free up Jefferson? Get the next Jarius Wright. Yeah, get the next Jarius Wright. Do you mean, is there like a possession wide receiver? Yeah, Truth Bomb suggests Elijah Surratt. No, there's actually, the cool thing about this draft is that there's a little bit of everything at the wide receiver position. There are Zachariah Branch, whose arrest I would not say would change anything, unless you're concerned he's going to stand in the sidewalks of Minnesota and not move when asked. But, I mean, Zachariah Branch, you mentioned Banks earlier, the Deion Banks, the wide receiver. So those are like the quicker guys, get the ball in their hands. I think Antonio Williams is who you're talking about, or Skylar Bell. I like both of those guys as route running specialists, get open, good hands, track the football extremely well. And Surratt is one of them, but not necessarily like the biggest, strongest, fastest. I tend to like those guys a lot. I need to try creamy coconut Dr. Pepper. I don't know, man. I think I'm just a straight, like, why mess with perfection? You know what that sounds like to me? That sounds like the Tampa Bay Bucks needing to change their uniforms. That's what it's like. They didn't need to change their uniforms. It was perfect. Josh, Sonny Styles and McCoy are my drop candidates. Yeah, Sonny Styles might be a little bit overrated, and he might be a guy that they need to trade up for. Doomer KO, upcoming shows of the week, positional ranking, biggest draft crushes. Tomorrow, Chris Trapasso and I are going to do an epic show. Also, I'm working on a very special guest. I'm not going to reveal it yet, but it's very special. But yeah, Chris Trapasso and I are going to go crazy with stuff like that. But draft crushes or just like our guys will be a part of that for sure. Would I take from Truth Bomb? Would I take Eagles 54 and 98 for Grenard? Yeah, I would. It just seems like they don't want to give him a big, like a big contract, a contract extension at this point. So if you're not going to give him multiple years in this draft, I think 54 might get you a starter, and 98. The only problem is the Eagles just really don't like the idea of giving him to the Eagles. But if they're the only team out there, then you might as well. David, I think the Vikings take a big swing. We'll trade up to number 1 in this draft. Okay. They could take a big swing. They're not going to trade up to number 1 in this draft, but they could take a big swing to trade up in the draft if one of those guys that we were just talking about, like Sonny Styles, drops to a certain point. I mean, if he's at 11, for example, and Miami just wants draft picks, you'd have to at least think about it. But trading up for a linebacker is pretty risky. JP, don't think that Banks is an impact player for this team. Couldn't have a major impact with the size against lower competition. Yeah, Caleb Banks is a big red flag for me. Huge red flag player. Could be boom or bust, but man, he didn't do it in college. I mean, you really have to question that. Truth Bomb says he doesn't finish and tackle. Yeah, I mean, I looked at this very closely with the defensive tackles. If they didn't grade well in college by PFF, they just didn't turn out to be good. If they didn't grade well at something, then it almost never worked out. Doomer, should the Bills trade for DK Metcalf? I don't think so. I think the Bills should just take a pick. And yeah, the Steelers, I don't think are trading Metcalf. Maybe. Doomer, you thought Christian McCaffrey had a Darren Sproles floor. Technically, you were correct. Yeah. He's that kind of guy. That's Eli Heidenreich, fellas. Eli Heidenreich, that's my guy. John, feel like the Bengals are going to use the Giants are going to use the 10th pick for draft capital for sure. Well, that's right. They could trade back. That's what we're talking about is if Sonny Styles got to 10, would the Giants consider just trading back and trying to get even more? That's very Ravensy. Right? The Ravens are like the ultimate trade back team. So it is a little Ravensy to do something like that. Will Johnson, thank you, was the corner I was thinking of. Steven, is it weird that HIPAA laws don't apply to the NFL draft prospects? I don't really even know what HIPAA laws are, to tell you the truth. That is, that's out of my Purple Insider jurisdiction. But there was one scenario, right, where was it Jason Pierre-Paul sued ESPN for reporting on his situation where he blew off the fingers? Was that it? I think that happened. But I'd have to look into it. It's a strange game to play. Yeah, I mean, I actually don't know how that really works. I mean, if someone is leaking medical reports, that might be under a different than like whispers, because this is just whispers. Jamad McCoy has this going on. Like, it's whispers. I don't know if whispers break the law, but if someone were to take a medical report and give it to someone in the media and then they like tweeted it or something, that might be different. I honestly don't know. I'm not a lawyer. Let's see. Colton Hood shooting up draft boards. I like him. A very physical corner. Very physical corner. I'm intrigued. He was a first rounder at first and then sort of drifted into the second and now might be back, even though they've played no football. Son of Beavers with 66 picks between 97 and 163. Would you trade 97 for a third and a fourth in 2027? That, I feel like it's a good area of the draft still for a center especially, so I don't know that I would. But if they trade back to get fourths after that, I will be very sad because we're doing a live show and I will not be happy. I mean, technically that's a good way to go, but I think in this draft, toward the end of the third, there's still quality prospects at certain positions that could really help. Is it Gayton? The reason, tell me if I'm saying that wrong. Or is it Gaetano? Gaetano? Is that what it is? Yeah. Okay. Gaetano's Christmas channel. Yeah. Gaetano. The reason Sadiq, did not have high productions because Oregon, as a second tight end who may be the best tight end in the last 10 years. They do. Okay. I didn't know that. I just assumed it was because they spread the ball out a lot. And Sadiq still got his fair share of catches and yards and touchdowns. Like, you don't lead all tight ends in touchdowns for nothing if you're Sadiq. So I thought his production was okay. It wasn't mind-blowing, but it also wasn't like he caught 20 passes. Doomer, DT is definitely what Rob is referring to when he's mentioned not being able to manufacture. That's what I think. Not a twerk. Love the way that Thieneman plays, but struggle to justify the pick as a deep safe. That's exactly where I'm at. There will be no whimpering and whining if they draft Dylan Thieneman. For me, it'll just be like, I'm very interested to see how they make this worth more than your typical free safety. All right, let me get to the bottom here because we got some Wolves basketball coming up and I want to watch it. Let's see. Is that, we'll just call you Neb. Who are the running back and defensive tackle you would try to take a chance on in mid to late rounds? Could the thin draft classes at those positions present an opportunity for snagging a good fit in your system? That's a good question. I like Emmett Johnson the most of all the running backs and Jonah Coleman right there with him. And I think those two are late third round type of picks that would be really good fits, high character guys, explosive players, maybe not technically, but if you look at the 10-yard split for Emmett Johnson, it's not that different than the other top running backs in this class. It's just long speed. He does not seem to have in the same way, but he could catch passes. Really like his character. Everything I've heard about him is great. Intelligence matters at running back. We do not give enough credit to running back intelligence. And hey, look, if he becomes an Amir Abdullah in his prime, not with the Vikings, okay, well, that helps. That gives them something. I think Jonah Coleman might be even more than that. So I like those guys. rather than the big swing, risky running back who probably doesn't know how to run a football. And defensive tackle, there's like 8 different guys who are run stuffers, but I'm very interested in Grayson Halton from Oklahoma. He is the Jalen Redmond type where he's not 350 pounds, but he gets in the backfield, makes plays, lightning quick, has good technique. So I'm more interested in that kind of guy. That guy is fit more with the Vikings than somebody like Daryl Jackson, who's 340 pounds. So, but I think I think there could be some opportunities there. Doomer trashing a hotel room if they don't extend O'Neal and trade Grenard to the Eagles. I don't know, man. I don't know if that's going to happen. I said it correctly. Good. Okay. Gaetano's Christmas channel. Beautiful. Johnson, very shifty, reminds me of Aaron Jones. I like him a lot. And when somebody produces like that and carries an offense like that, it's going to catch my eye more than someone who just runs a really fast 40. Anyway, okay, well, great stuff, guys. Really, really fun today. Hopefully you enjoyed the show. Tomorrow, Chris Trapasso draft show, the last one before the draft. We have a ton on tap there. We're going to mock the picks leading up to the Vikings. We're going to talk about our favorite fits in the draft for the Vikings, the guys that we are putting our bets on, and that'll be really fun. There's a special guest that I'm working on, and we'll be very excited to have on the show if everything can work out for tomorrow as well. And then on to Wednesday, which will be our last live chat before the draft. It'll be get out your final draft takes, and then Thursday, Friday night live through the entire draft. So again, I'm going to have to try to talk quieter so I don't use my voice, but I'm very excited to be live during the first 3 rounds of the draft. Unlike last year where they had no picks and there was no point, but there is a point now. I hope they don't just trade them. Anyway, all right. Well, so thanks for watching. Enjoy the Wolves. Best of luck to them, and we will catch you all very soon. Football.